I always imagined my wedding day would be perfect. Instead, I'm standing here in my custom-made dress, watching my future mother-in-law steal my thunder with what has to be the most ridiculous pregnancy announcement I've ever heard. My name is Felicity, and this was supposed to be my moment. Sean and I had planned everything down to the last detail. The garden ceremony, the string quartet, even the exact shade of blue for the hydrangeas. But apparently, Cassandra had other plans. I just couldn't keep it in any longer. She practically squealed into the microphone she'd somehow acquired during the father of the bride's speech. "Sean, darling, you're going to be a big brother." The guests collectively gasped. I watched in horror as my perfectly choreographed wedding dissolved into chaos. Sean's face turned an alarming shade of white beside me. "Mom," he stammered, "what are you talking about?" My sister Ruby caught my eye from the bridal party, mouthing, "What the actual fuck?" I couldn't have agreed more. Cassandra was practically glowing with attention as she continued. "Bob and I wanted to wait until after the wedding, but I just couldn't contain my joy any longer." She placed her hand dramatically over her stomach, which I noticed looked suspiciously rounded in her tight-fitting dress. "The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been like this, always needing to be the center of attention. When Sean first introduced me to her 3 years ago, she spent the entire dinner talking about her recent divorce from Sean's father and her new relationship with Bob. During our engagement party, she announced she was writing a tell-all book about her life. But this was a new low. I felt Sean's hand trembling in mine. The poor guy looked like he was about to pass out. Around us, whispers rippled through the crowd. I could see my best friend Paige shaking her head in disbelief. That's when something inside me snapped. 3 years of dealing with Cassandra's drama, and I was done. Without missing a beat, I grabbed the microphone from her manicured hands. "Oh my goodness, Cassandra," I exclaimed, matching her enthusiasm. "What a coincidence. Sean and I were planning to announce after the ceremony that we're expecting two." The room fell silent. Sean's head whipped toward me so fast I thought he might get whiplash. "That's right," I continued, watching Cassandra's face fall. "We're going to be one big happy family. Mother and daughter-in-law, pregnant together. Isn't that just magical?" But, Cassandra sputtered, her perfectly lined lips opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You can't be." "Oh, but I am," I said, patting my own stomach. "About 8 weeks along. We wanted to keep it private, but since we're sharing family news." That's when Sean, my wonderful, overwhelmed fiancé, did something I hadn't anticipated. He fainted, just straight up, collapsed next to me, hitting the floor with a thud that echoed through the reception hall. "Sean!" Cassandra shrieked, rushing forward. "Don't worry," I said, kneeling beside him in my wedding dress. "Paige is a nurse." Paige, my best friend, was already there, checking Sean's pulse and putting him in the recovery position. The wedding guests had abandoned their seats and formed a circle around us, phones out, probably already posting on social media. "Give him some space," Ruby commanded, using her teacher voice to shepherd people back. As I knelt there, holding Sean's hand and watching him slowly come around, I caught Cassandra's eye. She was staring at me with a mixture of shock and something else. Calculation, maybe. That's when I knew this was just the beginning. "Felicity," Sean mumbled, as his eyes fluttered open. "Did my mom just say she's pregnant?" "Yes, honey," I replied, stroking his face. "And apparently, so am I." His eyes widened, and for a moment I thought he might faint again. But instead, he just looked at me with complete confusion. "But we haven't." "Shh," I whispered, helping him sit up. "We'll talk later." I could feel Cassandra's eyes boring into my back as the wedding planner, Jonathan, started ushering people toward the reception area, announcing that we'd take a short break before continuing with the ceremony. Ruby appeared at my side, gripping my arm. "Girl, what did you just do?" I watched Cassandra being led away by Bob, her perfect makeup slightly smeared, her moment of triumph thoroughly derailed. "I have no idea," I replied honestly, "but I'm pretty sure I just started a war." Ruby squeezed my arm. "Well, if it's a war she wants, she picked the wrong bride to mess with. Looking at my sister's fierce expression, I couldn't help but smile. This definitely wasn't the wedding day I'd planned, but maybe it was the one I needed. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, or in this case, a fake pregnancy with a fake pregnancy. The bridal suite had become a war room. Sean sat on the plush ottoman, holding an ice pack to his head, while I paced back and forth, my wedding dress swishing with each turn. "Let me get this straight," he said, his voice still shaky. "You told everyone you're pregnant to get back at my mother." "No, I told everyone I'm pregnant because your mother chose our wedding day to announce her clearly fabricated pregnancy." I stopped pacing and faced him. "Sean, she's 54. It's not impossible," he mumbled, but I could see doubt creeping into his expression. Ruby burst through the door, followed by Paige. "Coast is clear. Jonathan's keeping the guests entertained with an extended cocktail hour." "How's your head?" Paige asked Sean, switching into nurse mode. "I'm fine," he waved her off. "I'm more concerned about what just happened out there. Felicity, we need to tell everyone the truth." "Like your mother's telling the truth," I shot back. "That's different, is it?" I sat next to him. "Remember last Christmas, when she pretended to have food poisoning because you were spending the holiday with my family? Or when she accidentally scheduled her surgery the same week as our engagement party?" Sean's face darkened. "Those were coincidences." "Oh, honey," Paige interjected. "Those weren't coincidences. That woman has more tricks than a magician's convention." Ruby perched on the armrest beside me. "Speaking of tricks, I just overheard something interesting. Apparently, Cassandra's been visiting some fancy medical spa in the city, the same one that specializes in hormone therapy and, wait for it, cosmetic procedures." "What kind of procedures?" I leaned forward. "The kind that might make someone look—" Ruby gestured vaguely at her midsection. "Expectant." Sean stood up abruptly, dropping the ice pack. "This is crazy. You're all crazy. My mother wouldn't—" A sharp knock interrupted him. Jonathan poked his head in, his usual calm demeanor slightly frazzled. "We have a situation. Cassandra's demanding we continue the ceremony immediately, but she wants to make a few minor adjustments to the seating arrangement and the speeches." "Of course she does," I muttered. "She also mentioned something about wanting to coordinate baby shower dates," Jonathan added with a grimace. I felt a headache coming on. "Tell her we'll be out in 5 minutes." After Jonathan left, Sean turned to me. "We need to fix this. Both of us, you and my mother, need to come clean." "Sean," I took his hands in mine. "I love you, but your mother has been trying to control our relationship from day one. Remember when she showed up unannounced at our apartment at midnight because she had a feeling you were in danger?" "I was sleeping," he admitted. "Exactly. Or when she tried to convince you I was secretly married before because she saw a wedding photo on my Instagram." "That was my cousin's wedding," I added. "I was a bridesmaid." "Okay, maybe she can be a bit intense," Sean conceded. Paige snorted. "Intense? A ghost pepper is intense. Your mother is psychological warfare in designer heels." A commotion outside drew our attention. Through the door, we could hear Cassandra's voice getting louder. "I just need to speak with my son. It's a medical emergency." Ruby rolled her eyes. "Right on cue." I squared my shoulders and smoothed my dress. "Sean, I know this isn't ideal, but trust me, sometimes you have to fight manipulation with manipulation. By pretending to be pregnant. By giving her a taste of her own medicine." I touched his cheek gently. "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this to protect us." Before he could respond, the door burst open. Cassandra stood there, one hand on her suddenly very prominent belly, the other clutching her chest. "Sean, darling, I'm feeling faint. The excitement, the baby." I watched my fiancé's face, seeing the familiar worry lines appear, but then something changed. He glanced at me, then back at his mother, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Mom," he said firmly, "the ceremony will continue as planned. No changes." Cassandra's mouth fell open. "But—" "No changes," he repeated, standing straighter. And afterward, we're all going to have a long talk about boundaries. I couldn't hide my smile as Cassandra backed out of the room, looking stunned. Sean turned to me, his expression serious but soft. I'm not happy about this pregnancy story, he said quietly, but maybe it's time someone stood up to her. Ruby clapped her hands. Great. Now that that's settled, let's get you two married before anyone else announces they're expecting. I'm looking at you, Paige. Hey. Paige laughed, throwing a tissue box at her. As we prepared to return to the ceremony, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I might have started this game of chicken with Cassandra, but something told me she wasn't going to back down easily. This wedding was just the beginning. The morning after our wedding, I found myself sitting in Paige's kitchen, surrounded by newspaper clippings and old photos she'd somehow managed to dig up overnight. My coffee had gone cold, forgotten in the midst of our impromptu investigation into the Wilson family history. Look at this, Paige said, sliding a yellowed newspaper article across the table. 15 years ago, Cassandra made headlines for disrupting her sister-in-law's charity gala with a dramatic health scare. Let me guess, it turned out to be nothing. Bingo. But by then, all attention had shifted from the charity to her brave recovery. Ruby walked in, balancing 3 fresh cups of coffee. You won't believe what I just found out from Jonathan. Apparently, Cassandra's been calling all the local baby boutiques, setting up private shopping appointments. She's really committing to this charade, I muttered, reaching for my phone as it buzzed with another message from Sean. He'd gone to have breakfast with his mother, trying to smooth things over. There's more, Ruby continued, pulling up a chair. I got curious and called Dad's old law firm. Guess who handled Cassandra's divorce from Sean's father? Who? Aunt Laurel. I nearly spilled my coffee. Our Aunt Laurel. The one who refuses to even talk about the Wilsons. The very same. Ruby leaned forward. And get this. She's willing to talk now. Before I could respond, my phone lit up with a text from Sean. We need to talk. Coming over. 20 minutes later, Sean burst through Paige's front door, looking like he'd aged 10 years over breakfast. She's planning a joint baby shower, he announced, collapsing onto the couch. For next month, she's already booked the country club. Next month? I exchanged alarmed looks with Ruby. That's ambitious. She says she wants to do it before either of us starts showing too much. He ran his hands through his hair. Felicity, this is getting out of hand. Getting, Paige snorted. It got out of hand the moment she hijacked your wedding with her geriatric pregnancy announcement. Has anyone actually seen her medical records? Ruby asked. Or her doctor? Sean shifted uncomfortably. She says Dr. Harrison is handling everything. Dr. Harrison. Paige's eyebrows shot up. The plastic surgeon. A heavy knock at the door made us all jump. Jonathan stood there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. He held up his tablet, showing a social media post. Cassandra just announced she's having twins. Twins, we all shouted in unison. It gets better, Jonathan scrolled down. She's tagged Sean's father in the post. Sean bolted upright. My dad. But they haven't spoken in years. I grabbed the tablet, reading the post aloud. Overjoyed to announce we're expecting twins. Can't wait to share this blessing with all family members, even those who've been distant. Time to come home, Brian. She's trying to force your father back into the picture, I realized. This isn't just about upstaging our wedding anymore. Sean's phone started ringing, his father's name flashing on the screen. He stared at it like it might explode. Answer it, I urged. Maybe he knows something we don't. Sean stepped into the other room, and we all tried and failed not to eavesdrop on his side of the conversation. Dad, yeah, I saw the post. No, I had no idea she was going to. Wait, what do you mean you have proof? When he returned, his face was ashen. My dad's coming to town. Says he has something we need to see about Mom's pattern of behavior. Pattern? Ruby perked up. Apparently, this isn't the first time she's pulled something like this. Dad mentioned something about documents from their divorce. A letter slid under Paige's door, making us all start. Jonathan retrieved it, a cream-colored envelope addressed to me in elegant handwriting. "It's from Aunt Laurel," I said, opening it. My eyes widened as I read. "Holy shit! What?" everyone demanded. Aunt Laurel didn't just handle the divorce. She has proof that Cassandra faked a pregnancy back then, too, to try to stop Brian from leaving. Sean sank back into the couch. "That's impossible. I would have known." "Would you?" I asked gently. "You were 16, and according to this, she conveniently lost the baby right after your father agreed to a better divorce settlement." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Ruby spoke up. "So what's the plan?" I looked at Sean, seeing the hurt and confusion in his eyes, but also a growing resolve. "First," I said, "we meet with your father and Aunt Laurel. Then," I picked up the tablet with Cassandra's twins' announcement, "we give your mother exactly what she wants. Attention, just not the kind she's expecting." "The baby shower," Paige grinned wickedly. "The baby shower," I confirmed. "If Cassandra wants to play pregnant, let's see how she handles a spotlight she can't control." "You need to tell me the truth right now," Sean demanded, pacing our living room. "Are you really pregnant?" I set down my tea and met his gaze. "No, I'm not." The silence that followed felt heavier than my fake pregnancy belly padding Cassandra had helpfully sent over that morning. "I can't believe you lied to me, to everyone," his voice cracked, "in front of our entire family. Your mother backed me into a corner." I stood up. "What was I supposed to do? Let her hijack our wedding with her obvious lie? So you countered with another lie." He ran his hands through his hair. "That makes you just as bad as—" The doorbell interrupted our argument. Through the peephole, I saw Cassandra, wearing a fitted dress that emphasized her mysteriously growing bump. "Perfect timing," I muttered, opening the door. "Darling," Cassandra breezed in, air kissing my cheeks. "I brought you some pregnancy-safe tea and the most darling little onesies." She paused, taking in the tension. "Oh dear, is everything all right?" Morning sickness can be so difficult in these early stages. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Sean asked wearily. "Can't a mother check on her pregnant son and daughter-in-law?" She settled onto our couch, arranging her dress to highlight her belly. "Especially when we're all in this together." The doorbell rang again. This time, it was Ruby, followed closely by Paige. "Oh good. The gang's all here." Cassandra smiled tightly. "I was just telling Sean and Felicity about the wonderful prenatal yoga instructor I've found. She specializes in geriatric pregnancies." "Geriatric?" Paige raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that for pregnancies over 35? "Well, yes." Cassandra waved dismissively. "But she's very experienced with unique situations." "Speaking of unique situations," Ruby interjected, "we ran into the most interesting person at the coffee shop this morning. Brian." The color drained from Cassandra's face. "Brian, my Brian." "Your ex-husband Brian," I corrected. "Sean's father, Brian. The one you tagged in your twins' announcement." "He's here?" Cassandra's hand fluttered to her throat. "Right here," came a deep voice from the doorway. Brian stood there, looking exactly like an older version of Sean, holding a manila envelope. "What's in the envelope, Dad?" Sean asked quietly. "Evidence," Brian replied, stepping into the room. "Medical records, legal documents, and some very interesting correspondence from 1998. Cassandra jumped up with surprising agility for someone supposedly carrying twins. "Those are private." "We're private," Brian corrected. "Until you dragged me into your latest performance by tagging me in that ridiculous post." "How dare you?" Cassandra's voice rose. "I'm carrying precious new life." "Like you were carrying precious new life when you tried to stop our divorce?" Brian cut in. "Those records show you were never pregnant then, Cassandra, just like you're not pregnant now." The room fell silent. Sean looked between his parents, his face a mask of confusion and dawning realization. "Mom," his voice sounded small, like a child's. "Is this true?" "Of course not," Cassandra protested. Your father is just jealous that I've found happiness with Bob. Bob left town 3 days ago, Paige interrupted. I saw him at the airport. He seemed pretty surprised to hear about your pregnancy announcement. Cassandra's face contorted. She spun to face me. This is your doing. You've turned everyone against me. You and your perfect little wedding, and your perfect little pregnancy. I'm not pregnant, I said clearly. I lied because you lied first. Ha! Cassandra pointed triumphantly. See, she admits she's a liar. Yes, I agreed calmly. I told one lie, at our wedding. To counter your lie, but you've been lying for decades, haven't you? Brian opened the envelope, spreading documents across the coffee table. Medical records, legal papers, old photographs, a paper trail of deception spanning years. It's over, Cassandra, Brian said quietly. Stop before you hurt Sean any more than you already have. Sean picked up one of the documents, his hands shaking. You faked a miscarriage to get a better divorce settlement? Sweetheart, I can explain. No. Sean cut her off. No more explanations, no more lies. He turned to me. I'm sorry I got angry about your lie. I understand now why you did it. Cassandra looked around the room, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. This isn't fair. I'm your mother. Yes, you are, Sean said. But that doesn't give you the right to manipulate everyone around you. I think you should leave, I suggested firmly. Cassandra gathered her designer purse, her movements jerky and uncertain. At the door, she turned back. This isn't over. Actually, Brian held up the envelope. It is, unless you want these documents to become very public. After she left, Sean collapsed onto the couch, staring at the evidence of his mother's decades of deception. What do we do now? He asked. Ruby picked up one of the onesies Cassandra had brought. Well, first we return these, then we start planning that baby shower. After all, she did book the country club. You can't be serious, Sean started, then saw our expressions. Oh God, you are serious. Dead serious, I confirmed. Your mother wants attention. Let's give her exactly what she deserves. The country club's private dining room buzzed with activity as Brian shared more details about Cassandra's past schemes. We sat around a large table, empty coffee cups scattered between stacks of old photos and documents. She once convinced my entire board of directors that she had a rare tropical disease, Brian explained, sliding another photo across the table, just to stop me from accepting a job in Seattle. That's her in the hospital bed? Ruby squinted at the image, with what looks like grocery store makeup to appear sickly. Bingo, Brian nodded. Cost me the job of a lifetime. Sean picked up another document, and this one, from my high school graduation. Ah, the mysterious fainting spell that prevented you from going on that summer trip with your friends. Brian's expression darkened. The one where you were planning to visit colleges without her input. Jesus, Sean muttered. How did I never see it? Jonathan, who'd been quietly taking notes, looked up from his tablet. Because she's good at what she does. Speaking of which, she's just posted another pregnancy update on social media. We all crowded around to look. There was Cassandra, posed in what appeared to be a professional photo shoot, cradling her bump in a flowing maternal dress. Blessed with twins at 54, Paige read aloud, rolling her eyes. Age is just a number when miracles happen. Give me a break. Wait, I pointed at the screen. Look at the location tag. Dr. Harrison's Medical Spa, Ruby read. Isn't that the place that specializes in cosmetic procedures? Sean finished, including prosthetic pregnancy bellies for actresses and models. The door swung open, and Aunt Laurel strode in, carrying a thick folder. Sorry I'm late, had to dig these out of storage. She dropped the folder on the table. Everything from Cassandra's divorce proceedings, including some very interesting medical testimonies. Laurel, Brian stood, extending his hand. It's been a while. 20 years, give or take a few lies, she replied dryly, shaking his hand. Now shall we plan this baby shower? About that, Jonathan pulled up his event planning software. Cassandra's already sent out invitations to half the town. local press included. Perfect, I smiled. The bigger the audience, the better. Felicity, Sean touched my arm. Are you sure about this? She's still my mother. Which is exactly why we need to do this, I said gently. She needs help, Sean. Real help. Not enablers. I agree, Brian added. I enabled her behavior for years, and look where it got us. Paige's phone buzzed. Guys, you need to see this. Bob just posted something interesting. We huddled around her phone. There was Bob, clearly on a beach somewhere, with his arm around a young woman. New beginnings in Bali with my soulmate, Ruby read. Sorry, Cassandra, but I can't be part of your games anymore. P.S. We both know you're not pregnant. Well, that's going to complicate her story, Jonathan mused. Save that post, I instructed. We'll need it for the shower. Speaking of the shower, Laurel opened her folder. I have some ideas for the guest list, starting with every person she's ever manipulated. That could be a long list, Brian warned. Exactly, Laurel smiled wickedly. And I've kept in touch with most of them. Sean's phone lit up with a text. Mom wants to meet for dinner tonight, says she needs to discuss the shower details. Perfect, I said. Tell her yes, but we'll make it a group dinner. And I'll make sure to book a table near the windows, Jonathan added. Better lighting for when everything comes to light. You're all enjoying this a bit too much, Sean observed. But I could see the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. Maybe, Ruby admitted. But your mother's been scripting everyone's lives for decades. Time for her to face the critics. There's one more thing, Brian said, pulling out a final document. The medical records from her first fake pregnancy, the one she used to trap me into marriage. Sean's head snapped up. What? That's right, Brian confirmed. Our entire marriage was based on a lie. One that took me years to uncover. The room fell silent as the weight of this revelation sank in. The shower's in 3 days, Jonathan reminded us. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. I looked around the table at our unlikely alliance. My family, Sean's father, our friends, all united in exposing a lifetime of manipulation. 3 days is plenty, I said, picking up one of Cassandra's ultrasound photos, clearly photoshopped. After all, she's given us more than enough material for one hell of a baby shower presentation. To the mother of all revelations, Ruby raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. As everyone laughed, I caught Sean's eye. He nodded slightly, finally fully on board. Cassandra had no idea what was coming, but she was about to learn that karma, like her fake pregnancy, had perfect timing. The restaurant's private dining room crackled with tension as Cassandra swept in, 45 minutes late, sporting an even larger baby bump than she'd had 2 days ago. Traffic was absolutely dreadful, she announced, then froze at the sight of our full table. I wasn't expecting a crowd. Sit down, Mom, Sean said firmly. We need to talk. About the shower, she perched delicately on the only available chair, directly across from Brian. I've already handled everything. The caterer, the decorations, the press. The press, I interrupted. For a baby shower. Well, naturally. It's not every day a mother and daughter-in-law experience pregnancy together. She beamed at me. Speaking of which, darling, you're barely showing. Are you eating enough? Cut the act, Cassandra. Brian's voice was quiet but firm. We know about Dr. Harrison. Her smile flickered. My obstetrician? What about him? Funny, Ruby chimed in, sliding her phone across the table. Because according to his website, Dr. Harrison specializes in cosmetic surgery and prosthetic pregnancy suits for the entertainment industry. I don't know what you're implying. Bob called me, Sean cut in, right before he posted about his new life in Bali. Cassandra's hand flew to her throat. He what? Told us everything, I added. About how you planned this whole thing when you found out he was leaving you for someone else. That's ridiculous. She grabbed her water glass with trembling hands. I'm carrying twins. Like you were carrying my sibling during the divorce? Sean asked. Or should I say, pretending to carry? The color drained from Cassandra's face. Who told you about that? I did, Brian said, opening his folder, along with evidence of every other lie you've told over the years. Those records are private. She tried to snatch the folder, but Brian pulled it back. Not anymore. Not since you decided to tag me in your latest performance. Jonathan cleared his throat. The guest list for the shower has grown quite interesting. We've heard back from almost everyone, including your sister-in-law, whose charity event you ruined in 2008, and your former best friend, whose wedding you interrupted with your terminal illness diagnosis. Paige added. That was different. Cassandra's voice rose. I was going through a difficult time. You're always going through a difficult time, Sean said wearily. Always at exactly the moment when someone else is happy. How dare you? She stood up, her prosthetic bump shifting noticeably. I'm your mother. Yes, you are, Sean replied, which is why we're giving you a choice. I pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Inside is the name and number of Dr. Peters. She's an excellent therapist who specializes in personality disorders. You think I need therapy? Cassandra laughed shrilly. Option 2, Brian continued, is we go ahead with the shower as planned, with a few minor adjustments to the program. What adjustments? Her eyes narrowed. A comprehensive presentation, Ruby explained cheerfully, featuring 20 years of your greatest hits, photos, documents, medical records, even that video of you practicing your feint at the charity gala. You wouldn't dare. Try us, I challenged. You've spent years manipulating everyone around you. It stops now. Cassandra's eyes darted around the table, looking for an ally and finding none. Her hand unconsciously went to her fake bump, which had shifted noticeably to the left. Sean, she pleaded, you can't let them do this to your own mother. I'm doing this because you're my mother, he replied. Get help, Mom. Real help. The waiter chose that moment to appear with menus. Cassandra grabbed her purse, standing so abruptly, her chair toppled backward. This isn't over, she hissed. Actually, Aunt Laurel spoke for the first time. It is. The shower's in 2 days. You have until tomorrow at noon to call Dr. Peters, or we proceed as planned. With press coverage, Jonathan added helpfully, as requested. We watched as Cassandra stormed out, her exit somewhat undermined by her crooked prosthetic bump. Well, Paige broke the silence. That went about as well as expected. You think she'll call the therapist? Ruby asked. No, Sean and Brian answered simultaneously. Then we proceed with Plan B. I picked up my menu. But first, I'm starving. Anyone else want to split the calamari? As we ordered dinner, I noticed Sean looking at his phone. Everything okay? He showed me the screen. A text from Cassandra. You'll regret this, all of you. Sounds like a threat. Ruby peered over my shoulder. Sounds like someone who's cornered, Brian corrected. And that's when Cassandra is most dangerous. Let her try something, I said, squeezing Sean's hand. We have truth on our side. Plus video evidence, Jonathan added, waving his tablet. Lots and lots of video evidence. As our appetizers arrived, I couldn't shake the feeling that Cassandra wasn't done yet. But this time, we were ready for whatever performance she had planned. The country club ballroom buzzed with anticipation. Cassandra had outdone herself with the decorations. Twin-themed everything, from the matching blue and pink balloon arches to the 2 times the blessing banner stretched across the stage. She didn't call Dr. Peters, Sean confirmed, checking his phone one last time. Of course she didn't. Ruby adjusted the projector screen. That would require admitting she needs help. Guests began filtering in, many of them familiar faces from Cassandra's past. Her former best friend Margaret, who'd lost her husband to cancer while Cassandra faked her own terminal diagnosis. Sarah, the sister-in-law, whose charity event she'd hijacked. Even Bob's ex-wife, looking particularly pleased to be there. The press is here, Jonathan whispered, nodding toward a cluster of local reporters. And you won't believe who Cassandra invited as her personal photographer. Who? My cousin Tony, the same one who caught her practicing fake fainting spells on video. I couldn't help but smile. Perfect. The room fell silent as Cassandra made her grand entrance. She'd somehow acquired an even larger prosthetic bump, wrapped in a designer maternity dress that probably cost more than my car. Welcome, everyone, she beamed, one hand placed dramatically on her stomach. I'm so blessed to share this magical day with. Sorry I'm late. Aunt Laurel's voice cut through the room. She strode in, followed by a distinguished-looking woman in a lab coat. Dr. Harrison was kind enough to join us. Cassandra's face went pale. Dr. Harrison. Yes, though I'm a bit confused, the doctor said loudly. You've been telling people I'm your obstetrician, but I'm actually a cosmetic surgeon, one who specializes in prosthetic pregnancy suits for film and television. The room erupted in whispers. Cassandra's hand clutched her fake bump. I don't know what you're talking about. My real doctor is non-existent. Brian stepped forward. Just like your pregnancy. How dare you? Cassandra's voice rose. I'm carrying twins. No, you're carrying silicone, Dr. Harrison corrected. In fact, that's my company's latest model, though you seem to have adjusted it incorrectly. It's sliding to the left. Camera flashes went off as Cassandra frantically tried to adjust her slipping prosthetic. Jonathan, I nodded. Start the presentation. The lights dimmed, and the projector flickered to life. On screen appeared the title, A History of Deception, The Cassandra Chronicles. Stop this immediately, Cassandra shrieked, but her voice was drowned out by gasps as the first video played. Her practicing fainting spells before the charity gala. And here, Ruby narrated, we have medical records from 1998 showing no pregnancy during her divorce proceedings, despite her claims. That's private medical information. Cassandra lunged for the podium, but Sean blocked her path. Like the private medical information you've been spreading about your fake pregnancy, he asked quietly. The presentation continued, each slide revealing another layer of manipulation. Photos of her miraculous recovery from her fake terminal illness, documents proving she'd lied about various medical conditions to manipulate events, Bob's social media post from Bali declaring her current pregnancy a fraud. You're all just jealous. Cassandra's voice cracked. Jealous of my happiness, my miracle pregnancy. Her dramatic gesture caused the prosthetic bump to shift completely sideways. In her panic to adjust it, the entire thing slipped out from under her dress, falling to the floor with a soft thud. The room went silent. Then Margaret started laughing. Soon others joined in, years of pent-up frustration, releasing in waves of cathartic laughter. This is assault, Cassandra screamed, backing toward the door. I'll sue all of you. For what? Aunt Laurel stepped forward. Exposing the truth. Please, do sue us. I'd love to present all this evidence in court. Sean, Cassandra pleaded. Tell them to stop. I'm your mother. Yes, you are. Sean's voice was gentle but firm. Which is why we did this. You need help, Mom. Real help. I don't need anything except loyal family, she pointed at me. This is all your fault. You turned my son against me. No, Mom. Sean took my hand. Your lies turned everyone against you. Dr. Peters emerged from the crowd. My offer still stands, Cassandra. We can start sessions whenever you're ready. Cassandra looked around the room, at the reporters taking notes, at her former victims finally seeing justice, at her own prosthetic belly lying sadly on the floor. This isn't over, she whispered, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Actually, I picked up the fake bump and held it out to her. It is. The question is, do you want to end it with dignity and get help? Or should we continue sharing your greatest hits? For a moment, I thought I saw something real in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. But then she turned and fled, leaving her fake pregnancy behind, along with the last shreds of her credibility. Well, Ruby broke the silence. I guess this means we can serve the cake now. The tension broke as people laughed, the party transforming from a fake baby shower into something like a celebration of truth. Think she'll actually get help this time? Sean asked quietly. I don't know, I admitted, but at least she can't hurt anyone else with her lies anymore. The sunset painted the beach in soft oranges and pinks as Sean and I finally had the wedding reception we deserved. No drama, no fake pregnancies, just us and our real family celebrating under the stars. I still can't believe you pulled this off, Sean said, pulling me closer as we swayed to the music. A complete do-over, thank Jonathan. I nodded toward our wedding planner, who was busy arranging floating lanterns along the shoreline. He insisted we deserved a drama-free celebration. Ruby appeared with 2 champagne glasses. Speaking of drama, guess who just checked into Silver Pines Rehabilitation Center? Mom actually did it? Sean stopped dancing. According to Brian, she had a breakdown after the shower, finally admitted she needs help. Ruby handed us the glasses. Dr. Peters is handling her treatment personally. Paige joined us, kicking off her sandals. Don't forget the best part. She's agreed to make public apologies to everyone she manipulated. Starting with you two, Brian added, approaching with Aunt Laurel, though she'll have to wait until she's completed her first month of therapy. To new beginnings, Aunt Laurel raised her glass, and to karma finally catching up, and to no more fake pregnancies, Ruby added with a wink. The fairy lights strung across the beach pavilion twinkled as night fell. Our guests gathered around tables laden with food, sharing stories and laughter, real laughter, not the nervous kind that had filled our first reception. May I have everyone's attention? Jonathan tapped his glass. It's time for the father of the groom's speech. Brian stood, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. When Sean first told me he was getting married, I worried. Not about Felicity, she's perfect for him. I worried that history would repeat itself, that manipulation and lies would poison another generation. He paused, looking at Sean. But then I watched my son do something I never had the courage to do, stand up to the manipulation. And I watched my daughter-in-law do something even braver. She fought back with truth. Here's to fighting back, Margaret called from her table, raising her glass. To truth, several voices echoed. But most importantly, Brian continued, here's to breaking cycles, to recognizing toxic patterns, and having the courage to end them. Sean, Felicity, you've shown us all what real love looks like. It looks like honesty, even when it's hard. It looks like standing together, even when it means standing up to family. I squeezed Sean's hand as Brian finished. To the happy couple, may your life together be filled with real joy, real love, and absolutely no fake medical conditions. The crowd laughed and cheered. As the music resumed, Sean pulled me aside. Near the water's edge, I got something in the mail today, he said, pulling out an envelope. From Mom. Do you want to read it? He nodded, unfolding the letter. Dear Sean and Felicity, I'm learning that sorry isn't enough. Actions matter more than words. I'm doing the work now, really doing it. Dr. Peters is helping me understand why I needed attention so desperately that I hurt the people I love. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday to earn back your trust. With real love, Mom. That actually sounds genuine, I said, surprised. Dr. Peters added a note confirming Mom wrote this herself. No manipulation tactics. Sean folded the letter carefully. It's a start. Ruby's voice carried across the beach. Time for the lantern release. We joined our guests by the water's edge, each holding a paper lantern. Jonathan had arranged them in a heart shape, a much better surprise than any fake pregnancy announcement. Make a wish, Sean whispered as we lit our lantern together. I wish. Don't say it out loud, Ruby interrupted. Bad luck. As our lantern joined the others floating up into the night sky, I looked around at our real family. Ruby and Paige arguing about proper wish-making protocol. Brian and Aunt Laurel sharing knowing smiles. Jonathan directing the photographer to capture the perfect shot. You know what? Sean said softly. I think we're going to be okay. Better than okay, I corrected. We're going to be real. No more fake anything. Although, he grinned, You did make a pretty convincing pregnant woman. Don't even joke about that, Ruby called out, or I'm telling everyone about the time you fainted at the wedding. As laughter erupted around us, I watched the lanterns drift higher, their light merging with the stars. Sometimes the best endings aren't about perfect closure. They're about honest new beginnings. Ready to start our real life together? Sean asked. I kissed him under the starlit sky, surrounded by truth and genuine love. I thought you'd never ask.
My name is Jessica Brown. I'm 32 years old and work as a product manager at a technology company in New York. On the surface, my life seemed to be going perfectly, but beneath that, complex family circumstances lurked. I started working at a technology company right after graduating from college. Having studied computer science at MIT and graduated at the top of my class, I received offers from several famous companies. However, I chose a relatively small but rapidly growing startup. The reason was simple: I felt I could maximize my abilities there. Over the next 5 years, I literally worked without sparing time for sleep. I was the first to arrive in the morning and the last to leave at night. That effort paid off, and at the young age of 32, I was promoted to product manager. Meanwhile, my younger sister Kelly had been leading a practically freeloader life under the guise of looking for a job that suits her. After graduating from college, my parents continued to defend her as delicate and easily hurt. To me, it just seemed like coddling. I kept a reasonable distance from such a family and sprinted full force in my job while living alone in Manhattan. However, a year ago, the company where my father worked suddenly went bankrupt. Triggered by this, I gave up living alone in Manhattan and started living at home with my parents and sister, Kelly, who is 2 years younger than me. Our family of 4 couldn't maintain the house without my salary. Initially, I thought we could manage modestly by using my salary and my father's savings. But as time passed, my father's savings ran out and my main job's salary alone was insufficient. Reluctantly, I followed up on acquaintances' connections and started working on holidays, in addition to my main job. Honestly, with no days of rest, both my mind and body were screaming. However, I kept telling myself to endure until my father found a new job and Kelly found work. Jessica, about tomorrow's dinner, Kelly says she wants to eat steak. My mother started one day. I inwardly sighed and responded, yeah. And it looks like we're running low on grocery money. We can't afford fancy meat. Could you add a little more to the grocery fund? I frowned. It's only halfway through the month, isn't it? Then Kelly interrupted. The living expenses you're giving are too little. You're joking, right? I'm giving $3,000. There's no way that's not enough. Kelly snorted. Jessica, don't you know about inflation? $3,000 is not enough for a family of 4. I couldn't hold back my anger anymore. What do you mean only? If you have so many complaints, why don't you work and contribute to the household? That's not possible. Job hunting costs money. It would be cruel to Kelly. My mother defended her. I cursed inwardly. Despite claiming to be job hunting, Kelly was actually just hanging out at the mall every day. Worse, the living expenses I provided were being given as pocket money to her by our mother. Enough already. If it's really that hard, why don't we sell this house and move to Grandma's farm then? There are jobs there, and living costs would be. Absolutely not. I don't want to return to such a countryside. My mother immediately refused. My grandmother ran a small organic farm in Pennsylvania, and the business was doing well. If we lived with her and helped on the farm, we'd get a salary and could eat fresh vegetables. Life would be easier. But my grandmother was strict, especially about farm work, which my mother disliked. Rather, she wanted to avoid the physical labor of farm work. My father always said the same thing. We should all work together to maintain this life instead of relying on Grandma right away. That's what being dependent means. I wanted to scream internally. It's ridiculous to call me dependent when I'm the one earning the living expenses in front of a sister who doesn't want to work. Since moving back home, my parents' excessive leniency towards Kelly had become even more apparent. One day, an incident left a deep scar in my heart. I had been working late preparing for an important presentation and returned home exhausted. When I entered the living room, Kelly was laughing loudly and drinking wine with her friends. The clock was pointing at 1 a.m. "Kelly, I have an early meeting tomorrow. Could you keep it down a bit?" Kelly looked at me and rolled her eyes exaggeratedly. "Oh, work, work, work? You need to have some fun once in a while." Then, my mother popped her head out from the kitchen. "Jessica, why don't you join them? Kelly's friends are all nice kids." "I can't believe this. You know I have an important presentation at tomorrow's meeting, right?" Well, my father intervened. "Kelly needs to relieve stress too. Job hunting is tough." I was speechless. Kelly's job hunting consisted of shopping at high-end boutiques and cafe hopping with friends. Yet my parents defended her as if she was genuinely struggling to find a job. This unfair treatment had been ongoing since we were children. I remember one Christmas vividly when I was 10 and Kelly was 8. I had been recognized by my school for excellent science grades that year. I had asked Santa for a microscope I wanted, but on Christmas morning, I found a cheap stationery set instead. Meanwhile, Kelly had a costly Barbie dream house in front of her. She hadn't particularly wanted it. She just mentioned it was cute after seeing it in a TV commercial. But I said I wanted a microscope. I protested. My mother responded as if lecturing. "Such an expensive item is impossible. You're big enough to understand, right?" This pattern repeated over the years. Even when I won awards in club activities, it was dismissed as expected, yet there was a big fuss if Kelly achieved average grades. When I wanted to take lessons in something, it was declined because it costs money, whereas money was lavishly spent on Kelly's piano and ballet lessons. The disparity became even more apparent when it was time for college. I wanted to attend MIT, but my parents opposed it, saying, "The tuition is too expensive." Eventually, I managed to get their permission by securing a scholarship and deciding to cover part of the tuition with a part-time job. On the other hand, Kelly's grades were so poor that attending a private university was almost out of the question. Yet my parents sent her to an expensive prep school and even hired a tutor for her. "Kelly is delicate. It's for our daughter's future," they would say. But this unfairness gradually hardened my heart. Kelly's room had the latest MacBook, and her closet was filled with high-end brand clothes, all bought by my mother under the guise of being necessary for her studies. Meanwhile, when my old laptop broke down, my parents said they couldn't afford to replace it. Living at home brought back all these memories on a daily basis. One evening, Kelly suddenly said, "I want a new iPhone." "Didn't you just get one last year?" I pointed out. She replied discontentedly, "If it's not the latest model, my friends will laugh at me." Well, my mother seemed to ponder for a moment but soon said, "Jessica, can you increase the living expenses a bit? It's necessary for Kelly." I put down my fork. Unbelievable. My salary is for the family's living expenses, not for Kelly's luxuries. What luxuries? Kelly raised her voice. "I'm struggling with job hunting too. You don't understand my feelings." My father intervened. "Jessica, have some compassion for your sister. We're a family." At that moment, something inside me nearly snapped. Yet, I tried to remain calm. "Then let me ask you, how many companies has Kelly applied to this week? How many interviews has she had?" Kelly was at a loss for words. "I'm in the information gathering stage." "Information gathering?" I laughed sarcastically. "Is browsing for branded goods at the shopping mall what you call information gathering?" "Jessica," my mother scolded. "Don't corner Kelly. She's trying her best." "Her best?" My voice trembled slightly. When I started working right after university, no one said I was doing my best. Instead, I was told to try harder. My parents fell silent. Their silence felt like proof of the past's unfairness. That night, as I worked in my room, I overheard a conversation between my mother and Kelly in the living room. "It's okay, Kelly. Tomorrow, I'll buy the iPhone with my card. But what if Jessica gets angry? Just keep quiet about it. We're family. After all, we should help each other out a bit." Hearing that conversation, I sighed. My parents' attitude was not only hindering Kelly's growth but also corroding the bonds of our family. However, to change this situation, someone had to stand up. And perhaps that someone might have to be me. One day, the news surfaced that Kelly was engaged. Kelly had a boyfriend named Tony, whom she met through a friend's introduction. Tony was indeed a successful investment banker with a promising future. However, it was clear that Kelly was attracted to him for his financial stability. Likely, Kelly had approached Tony with ulterior motives hidden. Using her natural sociability, she must have made her way into his circle. Indeed, Kelly's demeanor in front of Tony was entirely different from how she acted around me. Her usual assertive remarks were gone, and in front of him, she adopted a sweet, doting expression. As their relationship progressed, Kelly's behavior escalated further. "Hey, Jessica." One day, Kelly entered my room. "Tony's parents are going to set us up with a new apartment before we get engaged." "Oh, that's nice," I responded nonchalantly. "But we need to furnish it. I especially want to coordinate the bedroom with luxury furniture." I could guess where this was heading. "You want me to give you money?" "Please. I'll definitely pay you back later," Kelly said with a voice that would have been hard for the old me to refuse. "The answer is no. That's enough." Then, my mother entered the room. Apparently, she had been listening to our conversation from outside the door. "Jessica, why are you being so cold? Your sister is trying to find happiness." "Happiness," I scoffed. "The only reason why Kelly approached Tony is his money. And now, she's counting on my money too." "What are you saying?" My mother raised her voice. "Kelly truly cares for Tony. Truly." I interrupted her. "Did you know she's been searching on marriage sites for annual income over $200,000? Kelly's face turned pale. My mother looked bewildered. "And before meeting Tony, wasn't she devouring books like How to Marry a Rich Man?" "That's..." Kelly faltered. "Can't deny it, can you? I saw your browser history when you asked me to fix your computer." My mother still tried to defend her. "But that's..." "Enough." My voice trembled. "This is why Kelly hasn't grown at all, because you keep coddling her." That night, my father visited my room. "Jessica, Kelly might be a bit spoiled, but she's trying to find her own happiness. It's not right to interfere with that." "Her own happiness?" I said in dismay. "Do you think happiness gained by deceiving and using others is real?" My father fell silent. His silence seemed to affirm my words. The situation took a major turn on a Monday morning. I received a notification from my credit card company about a suspected unauthorized use. When I checked, there was a $15,000 charge at a local luxury jewelry store. Shocked, I thought it necessary to return home early to investigate, fearing that a family member might have lost my credit card and it was being misused by someone else. However, when I got home, I was greeted by an unexpected scene. In the living room, my mother and Kelly were joyfully looking at an expensive-looking engagement ring. At that moment, I understood the meaning of the credit card usage notification I had received. "What is this all about?" My voice trembled, more from deep disappointment than anger. I asked quietly, yet suppressing my anger, "Oh, Jessica?" "Listen, Kelly has officially been proposed to," my mother responded joyfully. "Look, isn't it lovely?" Kelly proudly displayed the ring. "And that ring?" "Oh, I bought it with your card. We're family, so it's only natural to use it for your sister's happiness, right? I felt like everything was going dark in front of me. You used my card without permission. It's okay. Once I marry Tony, I'll pay it back right away, Kelly said, as if she hadn't done anything wrong. Who gave you permission? I don't need permission. We're family, Kelly said proudly. Besides, this is necessary for making a good impression on Tony, who works on Wall Street. Is that what this is about? Using someone else's card without permission is a crime. How are you a stranger? My mother interjected. Aren't we family? It's natural for family to help each other out. That moment, something snapped inside me. Her words irreparably broke my reasoning. That night, I spent a long time in my room, thinking about the continuous unfair treatment from my childhood, my parents' favoritism, and their recent betrayal. All these combined into a single resolution within me. For the 3 weeks leading up to the engagement party, I acted as usual. My parents and Kelly seemed to believe that I had forgiven the incident with the ring. However, I had been carefully crafting a plan. When the day of Kelly and Tony's engagement party arrived, it was held in the banquet room of the upscale Plaza Hotel, with about 100 relatives and friends from both families gathered. Kelly, dressed in a pure white gown, stood next to Tony, smiling happily. My parents proudly spoke about their daughter finding a good match. I debated whether to stay until the end, but ultimately decided to request time for a speech. This might be an irreversible choice, but considering the years of unfair treatment and the recent betrayal, I could no longer hesitate. The host introduced me, and I stood in front of the microphone. The lights in the venue focused on me, drawing all eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering here today for my sister Kelly's engagement party. I began in a calm tone. My parents looked relieved, probably expecting a sisterly blessing to follow. Actually, there is something I need to discuss with you all. I took a deep breath. It's about the beautiful engagement ring on Kelly's finger. That ring was purchased using my credit card without my permission. The room fell silent. The color drained from Kelly's face. Tony looked bewildered, glancing between his fiancée and me. My family has been living off my income for years. After his company went bankrupt, my father didn't try to find new work, and my mother refused to give up a life of luxury. And my sister Kelly, now 30, has never worked a day in her life. My parents started to rise from their seats in a panic, but I continued. And now, they've bought an expensive engagement ring without my consent. They tried to justify this criminal act with the phrase, "because we're family." Tony's parents' expressions turned stern, especially Tony's father, who could barely hide his anger. Tony, I addressed him. I don't think you know the real Kelly. Do you know why she approached you? Kelly screamed. Stop it. Please, just stop. But I didn't halt. She was attracted to your status and income. In fact, before meeting you, she was looking for a wealthy man. I know she searched online for how to find a rich husband and frequented upscale clubs. Tony stood up, his face a mix of anger and sadness. Is this true, Kelly? Kelly couldn't respond, she just broke down crying. Then, unexpectedly, someone else stood up, my grandmother. She began to speak in a calm yet dignified voice. I have something to say. The room's attention shifted to her. I've been worried about this family's dynamics for a long time. My daughter and son-in-law's coddling, the excessive leniency towards my granddaughter, and the unfair treatment towards my other granddaughter. My grandmother looked at my parents. You've taken Jessica's efforts and dedication for granted for too long, and now the results are evident here. She turned to me, her eyes filled with understanding and sympathy. Jessica, I fully understand your feelings, but you don't need to hurt yourself anymore. Enough is enough. Then, she turned back to my parents and Kelly. All of you, come to my farm. You will work there and relearn what it means to be human. This is not a suggestion, it's an order. Tony's parents stood up, took their son, and left the venue. The engagement was effectively off. Once again, My grandmother spoke. So, I heard about the situation from Jessica over the phone. Are you three ready with your bags? Are you kidding me? My mother exclaimed in shock. Just then, a police officer entered. As my bewildered family struggled to comprehend the situation, I explained. I had already reported it. The unauthorized use of my card is a criminal act. You could go to prison for this, but if you're willing to work hard under Grandma's supervision and show you're ready to change, maybe things can be different. My parents and Kelly were speechless at the sudden turn of events. However, they accepted the situation and chose to work at the farm. I decided to throw them a lifeline for the last time. Some might call it leniency, but they were family after all. That evening, a large moving truck arrived. Their belongings had already been shipped to my grandmother's farm. I decided to rent a new apartment and return to living alone. Kelly agreed to slowly repay the cost of the ring by working at the farm. While setting up my new life, I looked out the window. The evening sky was stained red. Time passed, and a year went by. I had fully adjusted to life in my new apartment. Work was going well, and I had been selected as the leader of a new project. On weekends, I enjoyed my hobby of reading and sometimes went out for brunch with friends. I felt like I had finally regained a normal life. One day, I received a call from my grandmother. "Jessica, how are you doing?" Her voice sounded softer than usual. "Fine, thanks to you." "That's good. You know, it's about Kelly." I caught my breath. "She has changed quite a bit. She's up early preparing for the day and takes her work seriously now. She's even getting good reviews from those around her." "Really?" I replied, somewhat skeptically. "Yes, they are all changing little by little." My grandmother continued. "Your father has relearned the value of work through physical labor at the farm. Your mother is gradually letting go of her attachment to a luxurious life. But the most significant change is in Kelly. She's finally learned what it means to work seriously. She's developed a sense of responsibility. Recently, she even started attending a local vocational school to study agricultural management." "It's all thanks to you, Grandma." "No, it's thanks to you," my grandmother kindly said. "It was your tough decision that woke everyone up. I sometimes wonder if my choice was the right one. Was there a gentler way to do it that night? But now I'm convinced that it was a necessary decision. Standing on the terrace of my new home, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, I think to myself, complete forgiveness may still be a long way off. But at least my family is trying to change. And I too am slowly moving forward, dealing with the anger from the past. I remember the last words my grandmother said to me, "Life is long, Jessica. You may be hurt and angry now, but time can heal. And sometimes, things turn out better than we could have ever imagined." I haven't reached that state yet, but at least now I can walk through life on my own terms. That might be enough for me at the moment. And maybe, someday, we might truly reunite as a family. Holding on to that small hope, I look up at the night sky. The wind on the terrace gently strokes my hair. It felt like the wind was announcing a new beginning. I am currently 27 years old and grew up as the eldest daughter in a middle-class family. My parents have always valued family bonds and traditional values, running a homey restaurant for over 20 years. We lived in a quiet suburban area, and our home mortgage was fully paid off. Although we were not wealthy, my parents demonstrated diligence and devotion to family as their most important teachings. Until recently, I believed I could always rely on my family. However, 5 years ago, after my grandfather passed away, the situation changed. He left me a trust fund. While not a vast sum, it is substantial enough to significantly alter my life if wisely managed. The fund is restricted, only accessible after my grandfather's death. Being practical, I do not plan to use this money unless for significant purposes like buying my first home or furthering my education. I plan to patiently wait until the day comes when I can buy a small apartment in the city or start my own business. This prospect fills me with great anticipation. This trust fund is a comforting assurance and a chance to build something on my own. My 25-year-old brother, Tony, recently got engaged to 26-year-old Jane. Jane grew up in a wealthy family. She is a confident and charismatic woman who lights up any room she enters. However, I've noticed she tends to overstep boundaries concerning privacy and rules. People's reactions to her are polarized. They either adore her or interact cautiously. I had cautiously but positively accepted her becoming a member of the family. However, a few months ago at a dinner, Jane spoke about my inheritance in a refined and cheerful tone, which started to make me feel uneasy. She said, "You are really lucky to have received such a wonderful thing while showing interest in what I plan to do with the money." I explained my ideas about buying an apartment or starting a business, but felt uncomfortable discussing my financial plans in detail, so I kept my answers vague. Jane smiled and jokingly said, "It would be lovely if you could help with Tony and my wedding with that money," adding, "or it could help with our future plans." Tony laughed it off, but Jane gave me a look that seemed to await my agreement, creating an awkward moment. My silence prompted my parents to intervene, stating clearly, "That is our daughter's money." I was unsure if my approach was right, but Jane continued to argue that family money should be used for the whole family. I pretended not to mind, but her words made me uncomfortable. Over time, Jane's comments became more direct, and she would quietly talk to me at family gatherings. At one such gathering, she suggested reconsidering how to use the trust fund, proposing it be used to buy an ideal home with Tony, which would be much more meaningful. I politely declined, explaining the fund's special conditions and my own plans. It seemed Jane did not grasp my intentions. Tony later apologized for her behavior several times, but gradually began to say, "I understand Jane's feelings. You could help realize her dreams." Their attitude wasn't overtly pressuring, but it filled me with anxiety. My parents' response when I discussed this with them was unexpectedly ambivalent. They did not outright deny it, but seemed uncertain. My mother said, "Jane just wants to be accepted as part of the family," and added, "Tony has always struggled financially." At that moment, I realized this issue wouldn't be easily resolved. The turning point was when Jane confronted me alone at lunch, seriously requesting a portion of the trust fund as a wedding gift. When I clearly refused, she accused me of being selfish, holding on to money that could significantly change Tony's future. I was stunned and unsure how to respond. Later, Tony called to apologize, but his words felt more like an attempt to smooth things over than genuine remorse. He defended Jane, saying her words might have sounded harsh, but she has a point. I couldn't see an end to this issue and felt increasingly anxious, especially as my parents suddenly seemed sympathetic to Jane's views. It was unclear whether they were simply striving to maintain family peace or genuinely agreed with her. Either way, I felt like I was being made the villain within the family. Lately, I've become more sensitive to trivial matters. Relatives now frequently comment on how fortunate I am. Additionally, I've sensed a subtle shift in Tony and Jane's behavior, as if they are testing my limits. While maintaining composure, I am trying to defend my position, but I can't shake the feeling that I need to be prepared for an unexpected conflict. Honestly, I'm not sure how much longer I can avoid addressing this issue. Several weeks after the uncomfortable exchange with Jane, Tony invited me to lunch. It seemed like an opportunity for light-hearted sibling conversation, and perhaps a chance to clear up any misunderstandings. When I arrived at the restaurant, Tony and Jane were already seated. The conversation started with typical topics like work and wedding preparations, and we shared laughs about how tired we were. However, as dessert arrived, the atmosphere shifted. Jane leaned in and, as if she had prepared for it, started talking about my trust fund in a gentle tone. This time she brought it up directly, suggesting I give part of the money as a wedding gift. It felt more like a demand than a suggestion. She argued that it would be important for the family and would show my support for Tony's future. I calmly reiterated that the trust fund had specific conditions and that I had personal plans for the money. I thought I had made myself clear, but Jane persisted, emphasizing how the money could help everyone and how I didn't need it immediately. While Tony said he understood my position, he also argued that Jane had a point and dismissing it outright was unreasonable. The conversation left me feeling trapped, and I returned home feeling as if I had been set up. A few days later, my parents called for a family meeting. When I arrived, Tony and Jane were already sitting with my parents. To my surprise, my parents suggested dividing the inheritance to avoid pointless disputes. My father mentioned that family unity was paramount, and this might be a way to demonstrate support. Although they didn't make a direct demand, the pressure was unmistakable, and Jane seemed triumphant. I told my parents that the trust fund was mine and I had clear plans for it, but instead of supporting me, they began to defend Tony and Jane's position. My mother mentioned that Tony had always been financially struggling and that Jane just wanted to be accepted as part of the family. The shock of their attitude was overwhelming, and I left the meeting unresolved, feeling nothing had been settled. The following days felt like a storm. Jane had somehow involved the relatives in the issue. Aunts, uncles, and even distant relatives began contacting me, saying I should act correctly and support Tony and Jane. I realized I had been manipulated by Jane. She framed me as greedy and unwilling to support the family, arguing that my lack of immediate need for the money or its intended purpose for specific goals were not valid reasons to refuse. I confided everything to my best friend, who reassured me that I was not in the wrong, but the calls from relatives continued unabated. A close cousin tried to mediate, but Jane quickly dismissed her, accusing her of interfering unnecessarily. Things worsened when I received a call from Tony one late night. He tried to make me feel guilty with a desperation I had never heard before, and Jane added that the money would allow her to be accepted as part of the family and show how much I cared about them. I refused again, but the conversation left me physically and mentally exhausted. At that point, I consulted a lawyer about the trust fund to confirm that it was legally untouchable by anyone else. The lawyer assured me there were no issues but advised me to keep a record of everything in case the situation escalated. Although relieved by this confirmation, my parents hinted that if I didn't compromise, our relationship might change. It wasn't a direct threat, but the intent was clear. They had chosen money over family. It didn't matter that Jane was the instigator. I felt cornered, and any action I took seemed to only worsen the situation. Jane continued to portray herself and Tony as victims, sharing her narrative with everyone. The situation was completely out of control, and I feared it would only get worse. Then, I learned shocking news. A friend told me that Jane had already paid a substantial deposit for a lavish wedding. She had booked a luxurious venue, arranged expensive catering, and even completed fittings for a designer dress. It was surprising because she was spending as if she already had ample funds. That moment, I realized Jane was expecting me to relent. A few days later, at a family gathering, I calmly confronted her. Jane admitted that she thought I would eventually agree and confessed that she needed to make quick decisions to secure the best vendors. She expressed that she was advancing this year's family event, as if she were bestowing a favor upon me. When I pointed out that this was quite presumptuous, Tony intervened, defending Jane. He explained that Jane was under pressure from the wedding preparations and did not intend to overstep her bounds. Nor did she think she had gone too far. Instead, he believed all her actions were well-intended. Subsequently, many relatives, with whom I hadn't communicated for years, started sending messages to my inbox one after another. Many argued that I should make the right choice and support Tony and Jane. Others accused me of destroying family bonds over a financial issue, calling me cold-hearted. Amidst this, I decided to seek legal advice. The lawyer recommended withdrawing from the financial disputes within the family and maintaining both legal and emotional distance. It seemed like a bold decision. My parents sided with Tony, calling me stubborn and criticizing my unwillingness to compromise. Apart from a few level-headed individuals, it felt like almost everyone else was condemning my actions. Then, the most shocking fact came to light. A cousin informed me that Jane had been probing into my financial situation. She had asked Tony about the details of the trust and had attempted to access my financial records through him, ostensibly to solve a family budget issue. Jane completely denied this, claiming that the cousin was trying to sabotage her relationship with the family. As a result, the family began to split into two opposing groups. Some believed Jane's side and criticized me as selfish and greedy, while others who listened to my explanations began to understand the bigger picture. This division worsened the family's turmoil, turning gatherings into scenes of hushed arguments and sarcastically charged exchanges. I felt an intense inability to endure such situations any longer. The bonds within the family began to crumble, and the person who caused the issue seemed to have no intention of resolving it. All I could do was hope that the situation would somehow move in a better direction, no matter what happened next. After weeks of relentless chaos, I finally decided to take concrete action. The lawyer prepared to send Jane a formal warning to cease her harassment and defamatory acts immediately. Given her increasingly radical behavior, I felt it could not be ignored any longer. The threats themselves were superficial, and the lawyer explained that there was no legal basis for a lawsuit, but I was taken aback by her audacity. Tony, usually mild-mannered, had been completely drawn into Jane's schemes, and my parents intervened again. They urged me to find a peaceful solution to avoid further tarnishing the family's reputation. Their primary concern was not about right or wrong, but how the dispute would be perceived by others. They strongly urged me to make concessions. Their criticism escalated, and a barrage of comments and questions directed at me followed. As a result, I decided to cut off all communication with Jane and Tony and completely sever our relationship. During this difficult situation, my cousin became a significant support for me. She also said she would help gather evidence for self-defense if the problem became more serious. We meticulously reviewed screenshots of posts and messages sent by Jane, along with recordings of conversations from family gatherings. Collecting evidence of her defamatory acts was surprisingly easy. It was infuriating that she tried to affect my reputation at work, but I remained undeterred. Amidst this, Tony made a significant mistake in a group chat with my parents and Jane. He accidentally sent a screenshot of a private conversation with Jane to a public forum. In it, a message clearly revealed her true intentions. She explicitly stated her goals were for profit, and she candidly spoke about expecting my parents to eventually follow her plans. This message spread, and relatives' responses changed dramatically, with many more supporting my position than before. Even those who had been neutral or believed Jane's side began to change their stance. This shift was astonishing, and for the first time in a long while, I felt I was not completely isolated in this conflict. As expected, Jane tried to amend her actions. Realizing that her behavior would no longer be tolerated, she sent insincere apologies. The effectiveness of the restraining order became apparent almost immediately. Jane's posts on social media stopped abruptly, and Tony seemed to gradually distance himself. Although tensions with my parents persisted, Jane's silence allowed me to experience a relief I hadn't felt in a long time. I was finally able to focus on my own life and enjoy some peace. Through common friends and relatives, I reached out to my other brother, Greg. He told me that my options were limited to either maintaining a relationship with the family in name only or continuing the fight against them. It was clear that he was heavily influenced by Jane, but hearing such words from my brother made me reflect. For the first time, I confronted my parents directly about Jane's manipulations, Tony's pressure, and the entire series of events. However, They continued to defend Tony and Jane's positions and showed an unwillingness to face the real issues, prompting me to clearly criticize their stance. Yet, they didn't seem to be deeply hurt by it. During these tough times, my cousin, who had been my greatest ally, advised me that it might be time to cut off contact with my family, even if just temporarily. She reminded me that I shouldn't sacrifice myself to help others, especially when they are not willing to meet me halfway. After much consideration, I decided to distance myself completely from family gatherings. It wasn't an easy choice, but the constant tension was negatively affecting my entire life. I expressed my thoughts and feelings honestly to my parents. I had my lawyer send Jane a warning letter concerning defamation. That letter probably shocked her, as her post suddenly stopped afterward. Interestingly, signs of fraying began to appear in Tony and Jane's relationship. According to a mutual friend, Tony was beginning to regret the situation and felt trapped by Jane's demands. He had to acknowledge that her actions were not entirely justifiable. Nonetheless, they did not apologize or take responsibility for their actions. I decided it was time to focus on myself. I started therapy to deal with the family issues and figure out how to maintain my mental and physical health moving forward. My therapist taught me that while I can't change others' behaviors, I can limit their influence on my life. I came to prioritize my health and financial stability. I refused to engage with Jane or Tony and rejected my parents' guilt-tripping, relying instead on the support of close relatives and friends. This allowed me to finally breathe. Months later, after cutting off relations with Tony, Jane, and my parents, the situation dramatically changed. News spread through mutual friends that Jane had broken up with Tony. Tony appeared regretful about past events. However, I made it clear to him that any attempts to rebuild our relationship would require time, effort, and respect for my boundaries. Meanwhile, my parents began to make moves to rebuild our lost relationship. They admitted their role in facilitating Tony and Jane's actions and expressed regret over the risks they had taken. This ordeal proved to be incredibly valuable for me, allowing me to regain a sense of self-control and independence, and the effort was well worth it. My cousin, who had supported me through this trial, became an even more significant figure in my life. She helped me overcome the great challenge of starting my own business and encouraged me to focus on truly important relationships. We celebrated every small success together, from acquiring our first business client to settling into a new home. Her unwavering support reminded me of the actions I took against Jane, including issuing a restraining order and defamation warning. By the time Jane's breakup with Tony became public, her presence on social media had nearly vanished, and her reputation was at its worst. Friends began distancing themselves from her, and she eventually deleted her accounts. Later, I heard she moved to another city to start a new life, carrying the scars of her past but taking new steps forward. My parents changed, and we began to gather again without the previous tension. The relatives who supported me remained robust in their support. The emotions tied to past events gradually faded, allowing me to feel at home again for the first time in a long while. Some relatives even praised me for standing my ground and overcoming the difficult situation, leading to reunions with distant family members. The feeling of being free from others' expectations was more necessary than I had ever imagined. Reflecting on the events, I realize how much I've grown through this experience. Setting firm boundaries, prioritizing my mental health, and valuing self-respect over toxic relationships have become unforgettable lessons for me. The journey to healing hasn't been easy, and various events have occurred along the way, but I feel I finally reached a place where I can move forward positively, unencumbered by the weight of the past. Recently, my mother and stepfather were arrested, and I am facing intense anger from her parents about this fact. They were arrested because I reported them to the police. I had a legitimate reason for doing this. My relationship with my mother worsened after my father passed away 10 years ago. I am currently 17 years old, and will be going to college in a few months. I understood early on that my mother would not save money for my future. Therefore, I started working at the age of 10, took various jobs, and have been saving for the past 4 years. As a result, I have managed to save about $7,000 to date, all thanks to my own efforts. Additionally, I have received cash gifts from relatives on birthdays and holidays, which I always saved. The cash was hidden at home, stored in a wooden box my father had made for me. Since my mother would not allow me to open a bank account, I managed my savings this way. However, someone discovered this hidden savings, and a few days ago, I realized that the box was empty. When I confronted my mother about it, she told me that my stepfather had used the funds to invest in a new home. The moment I understood what had happened, I felt like I was going to lose my mind. At home, there was a fierce argument between me, my mother, and stepfather, but being 17 years old, I couldn't oppose them and had to compromise. All I could do was lock myself in my room and cry for hours. This was because I had to start over from scratch. I wasn't even sure if I had enough money to buy the necessary items before going to college. I was very disappointed and completely bewildered. That same day, I vowed revenge on them. The reason was that the issue was too significant to ignore. Fortunately, I was able to achieve my revenge. Just 3 days later, they were arrested and began to pay for their crimes. The only problem with this series of events was that my grandparents, who had always supported me before, have come to oppose me. I no longer understand what is happening. My mother remarried a man named Phil, who has been deeply involved in my life for the past few years, and I have hated every moment of it. He is one of the most malicious people I have ever met and deserves to be called an abuser. It may not be physical abuse, but I have definitely been at the receiving end of verbal and emotional abuse. My mother is usually the target of his attacks, but he sometimes unleashes his anger on me, blaming me with whatever words that come to his mind, causing pain to both my mother and me while increasing his anger even further. When he realizes that I don't care, he loses even more reason, and my mother does not defend me. My mother wasn't dating anyone for a while after my father's death, but eventually she started a relationship with Phil. Phil has a 19-year-old daughter from a previous marriage, and she lives with her own mother. At first, he seemed understanding, but soon after they started dating, a major argument occurred. This was the turning point that revealed his true nature. Half a year into their relationship, he began to dominate my mother, and she approved of them living together in our home. He is a careless lazybones. He is foolish and can't hold down a job. He is in his mid to late 30s, careless with money, and often relies on his parents. He always spends more than he earns, receiving money from his parents during arguments with my mother, and living lavishly off my mother during peaceful times. Unfortunately, my mother is not wealthy enough to financially support a partner who desires a luxurious lifestyle. She works as a floor supervisor at a local supermarket and earns a decent income, but it's nowhere near enough for the lifestyle Phil desires. However, this has never been a problem for me. Since I was 14, I have tried to be as independent as possible. I rely on my mother for minimal necessities and have not depended on her financially since I started part-time work. I rarely ask her to buy things for me, and the only things I depend on her for are probably housing and meals. I don't make special requests or ask her to go out. I understand that it's pointless to have such expectations. She has been cold and unaffectionate towards me from the start. From a young age, she has never been warm to me and made me feel unwanted. As I grew older, that feeling turned into a strong conviction. Once my father would stand up for me whenever my mother got a little angry, but after his death, I had to face her alone, and this situation has continued in recent years. The situation worsened when Phil came, but I comforted myself knowing that I would be going to college soon and didn't need to worry about what came next. Currently, the situation is very tough, and there is little hope for improvement. For the first 3 days after my money was stolen, I was very depressed and couldn't do anything in my room. The day after the money was stolen, we had to move to a new home. And even after finishing the necessary work, I didn't speak a word to the two people I was living with. For them, not talking to me didn't make the situation worse, and they didn't seem to care. On the third day, my mother said she was having a housewarming party in the evening and urged me to prepare, which made me explode in anger, and I shouted that I couldn't participate in a party for a house purchased with my money. I claimed that they had stolen my money to buy this house. This made my mother very angry. She said I should be happy that we finally have a house of our own, and I had to patiently accept this fact, because according to her, I owe them gratitude since she had raised me up. The reason I couldn't accept this was that raising a child was not her choice but a legal obligation, and she hadn't provided me with any special benefits. Moreover, I felt that the house was too big for the three of us, but they chose this housing to impress others by living in a luxurious area and having a spacious space. That day, I was very upset and took an action I usually wouldn't. I decided to contact my paternal grandparents, which was a bit complicated. After my father's death, my paternal grandparents found it painful to stay in touch with the family and had cut off relations. We hadn't communicated for a long time, but I had their contact information, so I decided to reach out to them as a last resort. The reason was that, although I had a better relationship with my maternal grandparents, they remained neutral in this issue. The day my money was stolen, I immediately informed my maternal grandparents of the fact. I believed they would resolve the issue for me after talking to my mother. However, they stated they wanted to support her in purchasing a new home. They were indeed pleased. From a positive perspective, finally owning a home and no longer worrying about monthly rent is certainly an advantage. I was told to view this as a good opportunity, but I felt it was strange. Their reaction was unexpected. They had always supported me and sympathized with me without saying anything to my mother, but this time their attitude was completely different, and I found it hard to understand. I felt very angry towards them and subsequently cut off contact. On the day my mother told me to endure, I contacted my paternal grandparents, hoping to receive support from them. It wasn't clear what that would specifically entail. Following my intuition, I called them, and fortunately they answered. As soon as the call connected, I told them everything that had happened. I understood they were deeply hurt by the loss of their son, my father, and usually preferred to avoid contact. But I explained that if my father were still alive, he would undoubtedly want to support me. I complained that my mother had stolen my savings, making all my hard-earned efforts over the past few years futile. While I could have gone to college, that prospect is now uncertain. When I explained the situation to my grandfather, he said it was causing quite a bit of chaos. Upon further inquiry, he mentioned there was a college fund left for me by my father, and he couldn't understand why I had to save further. This was a new revelation to me. My mother had never spoken about this, and I had never directly asked her. I had assumed that my mother had not saved anything. However, I had completely overlooked the possibility that my father might have arranged something. Despite being aware of his untimely death, I thought he might not have had enough time to do something for me. When my grandparents provided this bit of information, I found it very interesting. At that moment, I was very angry and frustrated, and I asked my grandparents if they could provide any evidence against my mother. They found some documents and said they would send them to me. While waiting for the call, I sat in my room trying to connect all the information. It was clear that my mother and Phil were conspiring against me, and it seemed possible that they had diverted the college funds prepared for me to purchase their new home. I doubted that my mother could afford such an expensive house on her own, and Phil had not been employed for the past 3 months, so I did not believe he had the financial capability. I felt I needed to obtain some evidence and considered reporting to the police after confirming it. Later, my grandparents contacted me and sent photos of documents signed by my mother. The documents stated that the funds left by my father should be used for my college education and a comfortable life. Reading this, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I had thought my mother was working to improve my life, but now I doubted whether she had signed it to complicate my life instead. In the end, I was furious because my mother had signed the documents. After my father's death, my paternal grandparents had left us alone without saying anything, making me feel abandoned. My mother had never actually been there for me, and I felt that all the actions of my mother and both sets of grandparents were merely an act. Engulfed in their deep grief, my paternal grandparents could not pay attention to me. When I asked them why they had not shown me the important documents, they made a somewhat cliché excuse that they had forgotten about it right after my father's death. In the end, as I grew older, we hardly talked anymore, and they also aged and drifted into oblivion. I couldn't argue with their reasoning and left it at that. However, having obtained decisive evidence, I contacted a police officer who was a friend of my father and sought his help. In the evening, as the housewarming party began, my father's friend, another officer, and a lawyer arrived and arrested my mother and stepfather. They were clearly in breach of their promises. The issue was not just about breaking promises, but about the legal action my mother would face for violating the terms of a contract she had signed years ago. As I explained the situation to the guests at the party, they were finally arrested. This was one of the most significant moments of my life when my integrity was proven. They were arrested at a time when they were trying to make a good impression in front of many people, such as former colleagues and friends. The moment my mother and Phil were exposed and arrested, everyone was completely astonished, yet they still acted arrogantly and glared at me as if I were the villain. My maternal grandparents were also at the party, and were extremely shocked to see their daughter handcuffed and taken away, refusing to talk to me afterward. They probably couldn't understand what was happening. It seemed unlikely that the money I originally had would be returned, and I felt that anything I did would be in vain. The house documents were in the names of Phil and his daughter, which had nothing to do with me. I considered selling the house and legally forcing them to pay compensation, but I would need to sue them for that, and I currently do not have the funds. I am grateful to my father's friends who made great efforts to help me. My mother and Phil were eventually sent to prison. They couldn't accept their situation, and no longer tried to contact me. This is very frustrating. Now, I feel deeply isolated, and although I have won against my mother and Phil in the short term, I may have made significant sacrifices in the long run. I have no clear idea how to proceed. I feel completely powerless. When they were being arrested, my mother and Phil tried to stop me to talk, but I had no desire to speak with them and quickly left the scene. I called a taxi and headed straight home. However, I had been staying at a friend's house for the past 3 days. This friend had supported me during my mother's arrest, and now I spend my days with his father, a lawyer, trying to find a fair resolution. During our conversations, I feel the need for financial support to complete my education. My friend's father has offered financial assistance, but I hesitate to accept help from others. It somehow feels unnatural to me. My grandparents still haven't tried to communicate with me. Since I received the photos of the evidence documents, conversations with both sets of grandparents have ceased. I am very disappointed with the current situation. I hope to overcome this situation as soon as possible and go to college. At this moment, that is my only hope. Indeed, my friends are providing genuine support, which is invaluable to me as I have no family to call my own. For now, they are the only ones who truly care about me. Months later, a surprising new fact came to light. A friend sent me information that contradicted what I had believed to be true. To avoid wasting time, I will explain briefly. In fact, my family had been plotting to betray me. Both my paternal and maternal grandparents had been involved in this plan from the beginning. My mother not only used the funds left by my father for personal purposes, but also secured benefits for the rest of the family. When I was 14 or 15 years old, my mother was in close contact with them, and fortunately she had recorded those interactions. As evidence, she provided the police with screenshots of conversations they had carelessly conducted via email. She stated that since she was arrested, others involved should be treated the same. She argued that it was unfair for her to be the only one prosecuted as they continued to conceal the conspiracy against me. Recently, my paternal grandparents talked about the evidence of the documents my mother had signed because their conscience had awakened and they regretted their actions. Believing I had no funds, I contacted them for support, and they finally decided to disclose the truth to me. They had intended to share this information for a long time, but had been persuaded by my mother and her parents not to speak the truth. The reason was that it would have been disadvantageous for them. They still cannot justify their actions and are likely deeply regretful. Now, I am completely confused and do not know what to believe or how to handle this situation. This is a very serious issue, and I have not even confided in my friends. I feel betrayed, hurt, and angry. Needing to take action, I plan to immediately report this to the police. The next step is to discuss this issue with a trusted friend and ask them to also inform my father, who is a lawyer. After this conversation, we will sit down with an experienced lawyer to plan in detail how to address this issue and how to move forward positively. However, regardless of the obstacles, I am determined to get into college. This year I have reaffirmed my determination for that. I am not planning to give up. I am already prepared to seek the necessary support from my friend's father. I do not plan to pay for my college tuition myself, but I am considering having him co-sign a student loan application. This process is essential for accurately calculating the amount withdrawn from my trust fund. Everyone involved in this case, including my grandparents, not only stole my money but also took away my future dreams and hopes. Therefore, I am demanding that they return the funds I need to live independently and with dignity. During a discussion with my friend's father and a lawyer, they mentioned that while such cases are not uncommon, the despicableness of the actions and the disgust they provoke remain unchanged, and this feels incredibly selfish to me. Therefore, my lawyer and I agree and have devised a strategy to take direct countermeasures. I cannot simply watch them enjoy themselves with my funds. This extremely tough situation is almost certain to arise again, but next time, it is highly likely that everyone, including both sets of grandparents, will participate. Their involvement in the case is clear, and there is no doubt about that fact. This case is likely to go to trial, but until then, I am committed to actively publicizing the facts. The trial lasted 3 months, during which many pieces of evidence were presented and testimonies exchanged. The final verdict was delivered afterward. As a result of a very detailed investigation into my father's estate, it was discovered that my mother and both sets of grandparents had conspired to embezzle an amount reaching approximately $400,000. This figure far exceeded the initial estimates. Included in this amount were payments from life insurance my father had subscribed to and profits from real estate sold in his name. The court not only ordered the full restitution of the embezzled amount, but also decided to add interest and damages. My mother was found guilty of public embezzlement and document forgery and received a 5-year prison sentence. Additionally, she was stripped of her parental rights. Phil was recognized as an accomplice and received a 2-year prison sentence. This included the theft of my savings of $7,000, and additional compensation was imposed on him. Both sets of grandparents were ordered to have their assets frozen and returned, and were given 2 years of probation, with my paternal grandparents being noted for their cooperation with the investigation. As for Phil's daughter, she claimed and submitted evidence that she was unaware of her father's illegal activities. However, the house she lived in was seized and later sold through legal measures. The proceeds from the sale were allocated as funds for my college education. Although this measure could not be legally avoided, a sympathetic view was expressed towards her. As financial support for my college education until my father's estate was fully recovered, my friend's father was able to co-sign a student loan for me. With this support, I was able to concentrate on my studies without financial worries. In fact, through this trial, the law firm I encountered offered me an internship opportunity. Through this opportunity, I became interested in pursuing a career in law and began envisioning a future in the field. This experience has given me a new direction in my professional aspirations. The case was widely covered by local media and garnered empathy and support from many young people. Many had experienced similar harm, and the response led me to start disseminating information through social media and focusing on advocacy for the rights of young people. This became a step that influenced many people and prompted positive changes. The warmest moment came when I was contacted by colleagues who had worked with my father. They shared many stories about his character and the efforts he had made for my future. Hearing these stories allowed me to understand my father's personality from a completely new perspective and feel his influence anew. Although I have become distanced from my birth family, I am open to discovering new bonds and possibilities. The unconditional support from friends and their families, the knowledge gained from the staff at the law firm, and conversations with my father's old friends have brought new hope to my life. These encounters have shown me new goals and directions. The most important lesson learned through the trial is the importance of having the courage to stand up for justice, even if it means losing loved ones. I also learned that true family is not just about blood relations, but connections of the heart. Moving forward in life, I am determined to proceed steadily toward my own goals, never forgetting to be grateful. At my high school graduation, although I was carrying all these experiences, they ended up lightening my heart and allowed me to participate in the ceremony with a positive spirit. Next month, my new college life will begin in a new city. I pledge to never look back and only move forward. I intend to live each day cherishing it, leading a life of pride as my father always wished.
I am Christina, 32 years old. I've been with Steve for 6 years already, and I love him dearly. I had always wanted to marry him and had proposed to him multiple times, but each time I was gently turned down. However, just recently, he finally accepted my 5th proposal. Nowadays, we are busy preparing for our wedding, thinking about wedding plans, and choosing outfits. But even amidst this busyness, every day is fun, and I find myself humming songs without even realizing it. Then one day, while feeling elated, a prenuptial agreement was placed in front of me. Steve had said that this contract was necessary as a condition for marriage. The content of the agreement was, what belongs to each of us before marriage stays as it is. We won't interfere with what the other inherits in the future. If the family situation changes, we'll update this document. I asked him while signing the document, "Steve, are you really concerned about this?" He replied, "Well, it's just for peace of mind, just in case. I think it's important for both of us." I was a bit puzzled as to why he was so insistent on this agreement, but I was more excited about the days ahead with him. However, a little incident was waiting. Steve has 2 somewhat eccentric older brothers. Before our wedding, when I met them, Steve advised, "Don't take what those 2 say at face value. They're a bit odd. Just take it lightly." In his words, my future parents-in-laws gave a slight, ambiguous smile. I hadn't seen them for a while, so I had almost forgotten about them. Then one day, while Steve was at work, I got an unexpected call from an unknown number. "You like fish, don't you, Chrissy?" I was completely taken aback by this sudden call from the brother-in-law I had only met once. "What? Who is this?" I recognized Chrissy as my nickname, but who was it? I was sure it wasn't a complete stranger since they called our home phone. As I was trying to figure it out, a voice came from the other end of the line. "Haha, you don't recognize me? I'm Steve's brother, your new elder brother." "What? Brother-in-law? Which one of?" "Steve has 2 brothers, but whose voice was this?" "It's been a while. What happened?" I asked, still somewhat confused. He said, "Actually, I went fishing today and caught a ton of salmon. I can't bring them all, but is it okay if I bring a few?" Steve should love them with lemon. My heart raced with excitement at his words. I could make a dish that Steve loves. That's great news. Steve's working today, but I think he'll be really happy if he comes home to a delicious meal. I hung up the phone and hurried to the kitchen. I have lemon and seasoning. All right, let's make a delicious dish. As I was prepping the ingredients in high spirits, the doorbell rang. It must be my brother-in-law. When I checked the monitor, I recognized the face. Steve has two brothers, and it was the younger of the two who had arrived. When I opened the door, he seemed a bit flustered. Sorry, can I use the bathroom? Also, could you cover the taxi fare? Saying this, he dashed into the house. Huh? Oh, okay, I replied as I handed money to the taxi driver. When he came out of the bathroom, he took a deep breath of relief. Thanks for that. You saved me. Also, could you lend me a bit of money? He asked with a smile, extending his hand. Huh? Money? For what? I looked at him, slightly puzzled, and he chuckled. The fish isn't free. How about $50? He casually mentioned. What? I couldn't help but let out a surprised exclamation, nearly dropping my wallet. I had assumed that the fish was just a shared treat. Of course, I felt bad taking it for free and had planned to thank him with a slightly expensive snack. But $50? That was unexpected. Looking at my brother-in-law's expression, it seemed like this price was the norm for him. He had come all the way from far off to give it to me, and the fish was fresh. I didn't want to say anything that would ruin the mood. Reluctantly, with a slightly troubled look, I took $50 from my wallet and handed it to him. Thanks. The fish is in the cooler. Oh, and I'm leaving the fishing gear here too. I've asked Steve to bring it home later. See you. With that, he quickly left. Huh, you're leaving already? Wait, Kevin. Looking at the cooler and gear left at the entrance, I exclaimed in surprise. But he, waving a $50 bill, was gone in a flash. This is strange. Leaving the gear here. We don't have space for it. Oh, I forgot about the taxi fare. I remembered the taxi fare I had fronted for him and was deep in thought with a troubled face. I feel awkward asking Steve to carry this. And about the taxi fare. How do I bring it up? What surprised me even more was the contents of the cooler. Gathering my composure, I intended to prepare a dish. When I opened it, I exclaimed, What's this? On top of a lot of ice was a small salmon. And there was only one. I was so shocked that I was paralyzed. Wait, what's this? Unable to believe it, I was lost for words. From the way my brother-in-law talked, I had been looking forward to getting a lot of fish. I had cut some lemon in excitement. Seeing the lemon I had cut with excitement, all I could do was sigh. Several months later, I visited a small cafe nearby. I have something to discuss with you, but don't tell my younger brother. The hasty call was from my husband's elder brother. His tone gave off an urgent vibe. Listen, there's something important I have to discuss. But I can't tell my brother or my parents. He emphasized that repeatedly. Although a bit anxious, the designated cafe had a cozy and bright atmosphere, and it was daytime, so I thought it'd be fine. Christina, over here. As soon as I opened the door, he called out loudly. Embarrassed by the stares from other customers, I quickly walked to his table, looking down. Look, you're blushing. Christina, you're really cute. Grinning, my brother-in-law made my cheeks turn even redder. Please, can you be a bit quieter? When I whispered this, he waved his hand saying, okay. Then, turning to the woman seated next to him, he introduced me. This is my new girlfriend. A stylishly dressed, beautiful woman stood up and looked at me. Just as I was about to greet her, she shouted in a low voice, "What's this about?" And the next moment, I felt a slap on my cheek. Stunned, I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Did a stranger just slap me? Why? The furious woman in front of me shouted, "This is your new girlfriend? She's so annoying," and stormed out of the cafe. Wait, James, what kind of prank is this? My cheek hurts a bit. I was so shocked that my throat went dry. But my brother-in-law just casually said, "Actually, I had a fight with my girlfriend." I thought of replacing you as my new girlfriend and ending the relationship. Thanks to that, it's all over now." And he laughed. "You're kidding, right? I never thought this would happen." I started to feel irritated by his nonchalant attitude. He waved his hand and said, "Well, these things happen. It's not a big deal. But this is the first time something like this has happened to me. How can I stay calm?" I raised my voice. Honestly, I was overwhelmed with anger, shock, and embarrassment. Then my brother-in-law said, "Don't be so mad. It's just a small thing." Everyone's surprised, but was it that shocking? Looking around, everyone was stealing glances at me. Feeling the gazes of the other customers, my cheeks burned with embarrassment. Out of embarrassment, I looked down. Taking the opportunity, my brother-in-law stood up with a smile and said, "See you later. Say hi to my brother for me," and left the store. "Wait, I want to talk a bit more," I called out, but he was already out of sight, and my voice didn't reach him. I quickly stood up to chase after him, but the movement was halted by a staff member with a concerned look on their face. "I'm sorry, but can I have the check, please?" The staff said, handing me the check. The only thing that came to mind was, seriously. Recently, I've been having more issues with my in-laws, and I was thinking about keeping a distance from them in my heart. But with so many troubles in succession, I felt both helpless and angry. After sharing everything with my husband, we decided to ignore any contact from his brothers. If they needed anything, they would have to communicate through my husband, and after that, I decided to ignore the several messages I received. But it didn't last long, as there was a 60th birthday celebration for my in-laws, and I had to attend this heartwarming event. They have always been kind to me, and they weren't just important as my husband's parents, but also dear to me. Wow, it's spacious, and that detached room over there is lovely too. I heard my mother-in-law exclaim. Seeing her enjoy herself lifted my spirits. If I can choose a place for the celebration, I'd like this house. What the in-laws wanted was a traditional house that I recently inherited from my grandparents. That house is actually a 230-year-old traditional house that was relocated. It used to be lively when my grandparents lived there, I explained with nostalgia. My father-in-law also added, reminiscing, "The first time I met my wife was also in such a traditional place. It turns out they met while touring old houses, enjoying tea together, and realized they were the same age. In fact, before my grandparents moved to a nursing home, this house was used as a traditional restaurant. Regretting not inviting them sooner, my mother-in-law comforted me, saying today was special and the place was perfect." At those words, my heart warmed a little. Seeing the house and garden, they were wandering around 2 hours before the party started. In the midst of this, the eldest brother came in noisily, showing slight dissatisfaction. "Huh? What's this? Only Steve is here to greet us, and we're having lunch in such a quiet place? Surprising," the eldest brother exclaimed. Steve replied with a warm smile, "This is a request from Mom and Dad. They wanted to spend family time in a cozy environment. And this lunch is a special version from a famous local shop." When Steve said that, I remembered how I had been looking forward to that lunch also. The second brother interjected with a concerned face. "Even if it's special, lunch is still a lunch. Shouldn't we have ordered more luxurious food in such a beautiful house? Aren't you being too frugal, Steve?" While it must have been expensive to rent the house, today was for my parents-in-laws, and I felt we should respect their wishes. Originally, I still haven't been reimbursed for the taxi fare when I was given just a small salmon, nor for the expenses at the shop where I had a commotion with his ex-girlfriend. But even after that, my eldest and second brothers continued to nag at Steve and me, occasionally cracking jokes. Through it all, Steve always maintained his usual calm and gentle demeanor. I really loved that about him. Amidst such a pleasant conversation, my eldest brother smiled and said, "Hey, I just thought of a good idea." I became a bit worried. His good ideas sometimes took unexpected turns. Steve looked at me with a slightly tense expression, possibly feeling the same way. After that, the eldest whispered something to the second brother, and they both started laughing with a gleam in their eyes. We're family, right? There's a way to make this special day even more special, the eldest said with a smile. Suddenly, the eldest brother looked at my husband and started speaking. Has this place already closed down? My husband replied gently with a surprised look. Yes, it has. Then, my brothers-in-law approached us with excitement. Wait a second, are you implying that you're the breadwinner here? The second brother said with a smile, and the eldest exclaimed, owning such a wonderful place and a big house. You're really lucky. Wait, are you misunderstanding something? My husband tilted his head in confusion, but my brothers-in-law continued. You can't keep this wonderful place all to yourself, the second brother said in a playful tone. Share it with us, aren't we brothers? The eldest chimed in, grinning. I understood their intentions and came up with a little idea. What do you want? I asked with a laugh. They looked at me, eyes shining, probably thinking of our family assets. But I couldn't simply comply with their demands. After all, this house was inherited by me, and it's not my husband's. My husband has always been supportive, especially when inheritance matters arose. He often reminded me, if there's any problem, consult me. Remember to manage our prenuptial agreement properly. Thinking about his warmth and sincerity made my brother-in-law's attitude even more displeasing. The second eldest brother said, This place is in an absolutely perfect location, isn't it? Just a short walk and you can get anything you need. And this house, isn't it a bit too big? In an exaggerated manner. To which the eldest responded, Maybe we should let our younger brother's family live here. If you don't agree, we don't have to meet anymore. Taking a deep breath, I calmly replied, It's fine. They were stunned. Really? Can our younger brothers live here? I answered with a smile. Yes, of course. Not just for the second eldest brother, but you are also very welcome. I hope you all find the house to your liking. Here are the keys. When I handed over the keys, the expressions of the brothers-in-law instantly brightened up. Really? We're so grateful. Yes. Christina, thank you so much. The two of them happily wandered around the house, looking around. On the other hand, my husband spoke with a slightly worried look on his face. Are you sure about this? I took his hand. Don't worry, I've thought it all through. A few days later, while relaxing in the living room, our intercom rang urgently. Opening the door, my brothers-in-law were visibly panicked. Why is this happening? We didn't know the house was going to be demolished. They waved a notice of demolition in their hands. Oh, that was planned, I calmly replied. They questioned in shock. Why? I explained. A new apartment building is set to be constructed there. To do so, the existing house must be demolished. They stared at me, stunned. I further revealed the high-end restaurant has received relocation offers due to its prime location. I kept it unchanged because of a 60th birthday celebration, but today marks a significant change for it. They exchanged anxious glances. Noticing their surprise, I felt a bit satisfied. Is the house really going to be demolished? Are you serious? Smiling, I continued, Yes, I am. So, you might want to retrieve any valuables soon. Everything inside will be discarded. Hearing this, their eyes widened even more. Observing the heavy machinery outside, I added, considering how active the construction site is, work might start soon. So, if you have valuable items, it's safer to take them now. After a moment of silence, they started discussing hastily. Is this real? We gonna hurry? Watching their frantic departure, I turned to my husband. It seems they really didn't know, I remarked. My husband said with a warm smile, based on our previous experiences, I suppose my parents and I thought it would be good for them to get a little shock. But we might have inconvenienced the workers. It's true that I handed over the house keys to my brothers-in-law. I had properly informed both my husband and his parents about my intention and their plans to move into the new house. Of course, I also let them know that the house had been successfully purchased and the details of the handover date. It was up to them to decide if they will tell the brothers the truth or not. but it seems no one told them in the end. Don't worry about the workers. I've already discussed it with them, he assured me. I had a feeling this might happen, so I had already informed the contractor. I hope you regret it. We talked lightly and then went to sleep. The next day, I can't believe it's come to this. Summoned to my in-laws' house, we were confronted by my mother-in-law's mitterings and my downtrodden brothers-in-law. Even if the contractor didn't let you in, what were you thinking? Trying to sneak into the house in the middle of the night? Well, you see. Apparently, after being turned away by the contractor during the day, they tried to sneak into the house at night to get their valuable items. A neighbor found this suspicious and called the police. You not only failed to retrieve your belongings but also got stopped by the police, my husband said incredulously. But, well, while the brothers-in-law seemed eager to explain, their parents just sighed. You both should apologize. My husband calmly offered advice to them, who didn't seem inclined to apologize. However, the eldest brother retorted with a hint of anger, "What? But this is all because of Christina." And the second brother chimed in, "I thought you were kind, but I was deceived. I was wondering why you gave me the keys so easily, but doing this to the house is quite a shock." Facing their sudden complaints, all I could do was smile. Brothers, it seems there's a misunderstanding. Actually, both the land and the house were inherited by me. We had discussed this even before my marriage to Steve. I've always maintained that what's mine is mine, and we even signed a contract on it. So, it's not your place to intervene. Really? Wait, a contract? While the brothers-in-law looked shocked, I decided to explain calmly. Since my grandparents' time, there have been various considerations about what to do with the land, but they always wanted to keep it as it is. They did tell me, however, that I could sell it in the future, and I consulted a trusted contractor about this. So, it's none of your business. But we're family. Why do you think it's not our concern? Before answering, I delved deep into my memories. I started thinking seriously about marriage about 3 years ago. My dad raised me with great care on his own because my mom passed away shortly after giving birth to me. Dad and I were close, like best friends, and we spent many times together, camping in summer, ski trips in winter. But those happy days ended suddenly when my father unexpectedly fell ill and passed away. I was overwhelmed, filled with regret for not being able to do anything for him and the emptiness of the room where his presence once was. During that time, my husband stood by me, supporting me during my father's funeral and subsequent memorial services. When I couldn't move from the room I shared with my father, my husband would make me homemade soup and listen to my stories about my father all night. I really want to marry you. You've always been on my side, always thinking about me. If you have something you don't like about me, I'll fix it. I told him during my 5th proposal. Then he looked troubled and said, I want to marry you, but there are issues with my family. I don't want to burden you with them. I truly love you, Steve, and I don't care about any problematic family. I reassured him, and we decided to get married. I absolutely have no regrets. I wanted to fulfill my grandparents' wishes, and I am satisfied that I did so. But Steve's brothers were a different story. I can't believe how presumptuous your brothers are. I can't forgive them anymore. They will pay for everything they've done. I declared firmly. Taxi fares, expensive food bills, compensation for slapping me, the cost of our tea at the cafe, utilities for the house, the expenses from calling the police, and everything else. Steve added, and his brothers turned pale. What? Even for that? That's unbelievable. Then, an even bigger surprise awaited them. Their father announced, You're disowned. What? Please don't, Dad. Afterwards, the brothers were kicked out of their parents' house. Their problematic behavior became known even to distant relatives. Having lost their place, the brothers were abandoned by their girlfriends and families. Now, they seem to live quietly in a small apartment. Is this our new home? Can we really live here without any issues? In a luxurious high-rise condo, we became neighbors with Steve's parents. Of course, as a condition for relinquishing the land, we agreed to buy this floor in the building. I'm happy that we can live close like this. Parts of my grandparents' old house, like its pillars, were incorporated into our new home. We took new photos as a family. Let's display this photo alongside the old ones. The photo captured the happy faces of my family. From now on, I thought to myself, I'll cherish the smiles of this family. Now that my son has passed away, you'll return to your parents' place, right? It'd be sad if this house was left empty, so we'll live here. You don't need to worry at all. This happened after my beloved husband suddenly passed away. It was his parents who appeared before me, sunk in sorrow, just after the funeral had ended. Admittedly, the memories I had with my husband in this residence weren't many, but why was I the one who had to leave this place? Without a moment to wipe away my tears, I was coldly told so by my mother-in-law. I am Hannah. I work at a real estate company. I met my husband, Tyler, thanks to the real estate company I work for. He was the brother of a colleague of mine. The brothers were very close to each other, and thus he often showed his face around because their workplaces were close. Working together as clerks, I also became friendly with the colleague who would later become my brother-in-law. It was through this connection that he introduced me to his own brother. They gradually invited me to have lunch together more often, and our time spent together increased. Tyler was a bright and nice person to talk to, but I never saw him as a man. I thought he felt the same until one day when something changed our relationship. At the restaurant where we had arranged to meet, a sudden matter came up, and only my colleague couldn't make it. However, it seemed like a waste to cancel the reservation. And so we ended up spending time together, just the two of us. I found out later that it was all planned in advance. At the request of Tyler, my brother-in-law had intentionally set it up so that the two of us would be alone. With delicious food, our conversation flowed, and we soon found ourselves sharing things about our past and our thoughts, rapidly deepening our intimacy. The more I got to know him, the more I was drawn to his warm smile. That day became a turning point, and our relationship evolved. It didn't take us long to reach marriage. If not for my brother-in-law, this wonderful development might not have happened. I was immensely grateful to him, not only for that but for all that was about to happen in the future. The day to meet my in-laws for the first time arrived. I was full of anxiety, but my in-laws warmly welcomed me. The heartwarming exchanges continued, and my tension gradually eased. I'm really happy you came. I was looking forward to meeting you, Hannah. I have prepared a lot of things for you, hoping that today will be a wonderful day, said my mother-in-law, who was getting things ready. My husband, the eldest son, resembled them a lot, and my in-laws were also very independent and easy to get along with. The time spent at their home was comfortable, and I was filled with gratitude toward them. Even after several friendly interactions, they merely supported our future without putting pressure on marriage or parenting, maintaining an appropriate distance. When the topic of living together eventually came up, we were dreaming of building our own home. I actually inherited a house from my grandfather, I revealed, and my in-laws listened intently and nodded. I received special affection from my grandfather, the only grandchild, and he left me a beautifully renovated house and land. My grandfather passed away just after the inheritance procedures were completed. The land, benefiting from redevelopment, was in a great location, and its real estate value was rapidly increasing. With knowledge in the real estate business, I knew that it would be more beneficial for us to sell it rather than live there ourselves. That way we would have sufficient funds for our dream home project. While I was grateful for my grandfather's profound love, the will allowed us to freely dispose of the house, so we were considering selling it. We started a new life on that land after getting married. However, due to the distance from our workplaces, it was difficult to live there permanently, no matter how good the location was. While preparing to sell the property, something unexpected happened. My husband, a salesperson, was suddenly assigned a transfer. His company, a large corporation with several branches nationwide, decided to transfer him, despite knowing we were newlyweds, because they deemed he was the only right candidate. I will definitely come back on holidays. Plus, my parents plan to visit, so don't overexert yourself. But could you take them out sometimes? I don't mind going out with them since your parents are kind. However, selling the house might take a bit longer. Since I had work too, it was decided that my husband would relocate alone. Even with the sudden turn of events, I suppressed my loneliness and anxiety and decided to wait for the day we could live together again. Like my husband promised, my mother-in-law would visit often, especially on the weekends. She once shared her experience of spending time alone multiple times while raising young children during her husband's business trips. Even without children, you can create family memories. Do you want to go out together? A little shopping might cheer you up. Let's go, Hannah. Thanks to my mother-in-law's thoughtfulness, I was able to spend time without feeling lonely, and my weekends became busier with various activities. However, as time passed, a concerning pattern began to emerge. Every weekend, without fail, my mother-in-law would almost certainly take me out somewhere. It was fine at first, but after a month, her invitations became increasingly forceful, showing little consideration for my health or household chores. When I mentioned I'd like to rest this weekend, she would sulk as if I was being selfish. But it'll be fun to go out together. You don't dislike going out with me, do you? She would ask. No, it's not like that. It's just that since we've been going out every week, I thought you might need some rest too, I would respond. My mother-in-law's face would turn gloomy. Even when I tried to clear the misunderstanding, she wouldn't listen. Once I reluctantly agreed, she would quickly regain her smile and act as if she had forgotten her persistent invitations. But doubts about her behavior slowly grew bigger in my mind. The places she took me often involved expensive spending. Brand name shopping followed by expensive meals, and the payment was always passed on to me. My mother-in-law would often leave the store before me, making it my responsibility to settle the bill. There were no thanks or reimbursements afterward. Indeed, I owned a house and had a stable salary, so I was financially comfortable. However, my husband and I had always lived frugally, so I felt uneasy about my mother-in-law's lavish spending. On occasions when my father-in-law joined, my expenses would increase even further. I felt the need to address this situation, but found it difficult to discuss with my husband. He had promised he would definitely return home, but that promise was challenging to fulfill due to his busy schedule at the new location. Are you okay with going out with Mom every week? Any concerns? My husband would ask over video calls, visibly tired from work. Hesitant to bring up my issues with my mother-in-law, I would pretend to be fine. Your mom is really kind to me. Take care of yourself, Tyler. I'm fine, so don't worry, I would reassure him. Yet, I lacked the courage to refuse the financial demands from my in-laws. Their behavior became excessive, and when I mentioned I couldn't go out one day, they made a surprising suggestion. Then, could you lend us a bit of money? Am I supposed to provide the money? Just a little is fine. We've already made a reservation at a restaurant. We'll invite another friend, but we're short on cash and need your help. To avoid conflict, I decided to lend them the money. I took out the money and gave it to them, but I never mentioned their request in front of my husband. Maybe you should talk to Tyler about it? I suggested casually to my mother-in-law, only to be shocked by her response. It would be embarrassing to talk to Tyler about such things. They felt ashamed to ask their eldest son but had no qualms about asking me. Resigned, I accepted my mother-in-law's demands, and financially supporting them became seemingly normal. The money I gave them as an allowance at least stopped her from forcing me to go out. I understood the issue was escalating but struggled with ineffective conversations and personal exhaustion. My mother-in-law's behavior became increasingly incomprehensible and bizarre. She would show up unannounced, inspecting my home as if it were her own, causing me to fear my privacy was being invaded. Was this something left by your grandfather, Hannah? This furniture is lovely. It's amazing to have such quality items. Some furniture included antiques my grandfather cherished. My mother-in-law was fascinated by them, often admiring and treating them as if they were her own during her visits. This place was a shared space between my husband and me. I finally decided to discuss my mother-in-law's actions with my husband. While uncertain how he would react, I hoped for advice on handling her behavior. Her actions were unpleasant, and even if she was family, invading our private life was unacceptable. Nevertheless, a faint hope blossomed in my heart when the date of my husband Tyler's return from his solo assignment was determined. The financial demands from my in-laws would end if I just endured it for a little bit more. I was eagerly awaiting the reunion with my husband, but the situation took an unforeseen turn. Tyler suddenly what? My mind froze. The news came from a colleague at his assignment location, and I rushed to the hospital immediately. We don't know if it was due to overwork or an unexpected heart issue, but Tyler had collapsed. Despite being rushed to the emergency room, Tyler couldn't be saved. My beloved husband, always in perfect health, had departed from this world way too suddenly. Unable to accept this reality, the day of the funeral came. I barely remember that time, shrouded in profound sorrow. My brother-in-law came to help, taking care of the minutiae. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to rely on you at a time like this. What are you talking about? It's my brother's funeral. Besides, is everything okay with the land? Is the house ready? After the funeral, while tidying up, I had a deep conversation with my brother-in-law. I nodded, responding, "Everything is settled." Days after my husband's funeral, my in-laws came to our house together. However, it was clear they weren't there to offer condolences. It's truly unfortunate that our son passed away so suddenly, but don't worry, we're here for you. Everything will be all right. My mother-in-law's face curiously bore a smile. More shockingly, she had arranged a truck loaded with furniture and belongings from her home. I was struck silent by the shock and confusion. Clearly, this was a move-in, not a visit. Without any forewarning, my in-laws intended to move into our house. The reason for their actions was unfathomable. Yet, the answer to my questions quickly became apparent. Are you aiming for our land? The anxiety I had long harbored slipped out. When I asked, my mother-in-law coldly replied with a laugh. The value of this property has increased significantly. We've always wanted it. As a matter of fact, your marriage was only approved because you inherited this. We agreed to the marriage because you were the heir. Filled with despair, I lost my voice. So, you mean to live with me? What a ridiculous question. To such an inquiry, my mother-in-law coldly retorted. Tyler's sudden death was an immeasurable shock, but, in reality, even without his death, my mother-in-law had planned to take over this house eventually. They intended to drive me out and become the new owners of this land. And she seemed to misunderstand that I had already decided to leave this place. Now that my son has passed away, you'll return to your parents' place, right? It'd be sad if this house was left empty, so we'll live here. You don't need to worry at all. The moment my mother-in-law's expression turned into a sinister smile, anxiety swirled within me. Yet, I mustered the courage to correct her misunderstanding. I've already sold the house. Without mocking my mother-in-law's assumption, I barely managed to explain while suppressing my smile. My mother-in-law stood dumbfounded, uttering, "What?" Just then, a new moving company truck arrived. "Excuse me, we have a delivery for this address." Another moving company had already parked there, causing confusion as the newly arrived workers asked us for clarification. The movers my mother-in-law hired came to us, realizing they couldn't begin their work, and the situation became chaotic. I urged my in-laws to explain the situation, but they were flustered and unable to provide clear answers. Realizing that arguing wouldn't solve anything, I began to regain my composure. I immediately instructed the movers my mother-in-law hired to leave the premises. This residence has already been purchased by someone else, and the contract is complete. A new family is moving in, so it wouldn't be appropriate to bring in someone else's belongings, right? The movers were visibly shocked by this development, when suddenly a luxury car arrived. A seemingly wealthy couple and their children got out of the car. This house was no longer mine. The family that emerged from the car was the new owners of the home. My in-laws were bewildered by the situation, struggling to grasp what was happening. "Please move the truck. We need to start unloading for the new residents." After the truck my mother-in-law called was moved, the other movers began their work swiftly, starting to bring in the new furniture that had been purchased. My in-laws, unable to accept this change, started to obstinately block the entrance. The new homeowners, keeping their family safe inside the car, approached me to clarify the situation. "Who are these people? This is the house we bought. Please have the truck removed immediately." Surprised by my in-laws' unexpected visit, I apologized and tried to calm the situation down. However, my in-laws were adamant, forcefully trying to enter the house. The interior of the house had completely changed from what they remembered. All the furniture we used was gone. My mother-in-law was shocked by the scene, becoming agitated and causing a commotion. "What is the meaning of this? The house is empty. Even the antique furniture and lights that I cherished are all gone. Explain this." She was furious, unable to comprehend the current situation. The silence was suddenly broken by the new owner's angry shout, "I'll call the police." That outcry acted like a start signal, prompting my father-in-law to hurriedly pull my mother-in-law away and leave the scene quickly. After a short while, my mother-in-law, who had been agitated by the events, gradually regained her composure. Meanwhile, I expressed my apologies to the new residents, feeling a strong sense of responsibility. To ensure such troubles wouldn't recur in the future, I had the new residents record detailed information about my in-laws, including their contact details and names, managing to defuse the situation. At that moment, I felt a profound sense of exhaustion throughout my body, but it wasn't over yet. I went to my in-laws to explain calmly that our move had already been completed just before my husband had passed away. We planned to sell this house from the beginning, along with the land, so everything is proceeding as scheduled, I told them. This plan had been on hold temporarily due to my husband's transfer, but ultimately everything progressed smoothly. Behind the smooth transition was a crucial factor. My brother-in-law, struggling with the never-ending financial demands from my in-laws and not wanting to burden my husband with worries, my brother-in-law was a savior to me. He had long been troubled by the poor relationship with his parents and had told me to consult him anytime if I had any issues. With that information, my brother-in-law actively intervened in our problems. Following his advice, I concluded that selling the land early was the best strategy to avoid losing the property to my in-laws, even though it was a valuable inheritance from my grandfather. Determined to maintain the peaceful relationship built between my husband and in-laws, I promised my brother-in-law to keep it a secret, ensuring peace within the family. With great courage, I opened up and shared all the events with him. Upon hearing this, my brother-in-law's expression turned to anger, showing his strong resentment towards his parents. My brother-in-law, who worked at the same place as me, was aware of the schemes his parents had been plotting and disclosed the truth to me. He passionately explained that Tyler, his brother, was the most important family member to him in the world, and as Tyler's wife, I was also an invaluable part of his family. My parents are either planning to live in that house themselves or waiting for a convenient opportunity to evict you and Tyler and eventually take over the property, he told me with a serious tone to his voice. According to my brother-in-law, my in-laws were extravagant, lacked common sense, were overly concerned with appearances, and wouldn't hesitate to use any means to achieve their goals. Regarding my mother-in-law, she was notably self-centered, lacking in compassion, and her behavior often disregarded others. While she always acted politely in public, her true nature was selfish, and she couldn't be described as genuinely kind. Learning about the true sides and everyday behavior of my in-laws from my brother-in-law was incredibly shocking for me. They always put on a good front in front of Tyler, the family's eldest son, so my husband was completely unaware of their characteristics or plans. My brother-in-law strongly advised that we quickly put the house on the market and sell it to prevent losing it due to my in-law's scheme. Convinced by his persuasion, we recognized the importance of selling the house and decided to proceed with the sale promptly, even if it meant parting with a valuable property inherited from my beloved grandfather, if it became a barrier for our relationship as a couple. It was a decision made prioritizing family harmony. I strongly wish to avoid leaving a source of discord for the future, especially due to the property's value. This decision was by no means an arbitrary one. My husband and I had discussed this matter extensively while he was still alive, and he fully agreed with it. He understood my predicament of not being able to consult anyone, and upon learning about his parents' actions, he firmly stated that he could never condone their behavior. He told me, "I'm sorry for not realizing this. Hannah, if you're okay with it, let's sell the house before my parents can do anything. I'm really sorry to let go of the precious house inherited from your grandfather. No, if it prevents future problems. I believe my grandfather would support this decision." I responded. My decision was not to prioritize the relationship with my in-laws, but to protect the future me and my husband were supposed to have together. Throughout the selling process, my brother-in-law, who was well-versed in real estate, spared no effort in finding the most suitable buyer. My tasks were to find a new residence and move as soon as possible, ensuring that my in-laws wouldn't notice while maintaining my usual daily life. The house, slightly worn from our use, was almost as good as new, which we considered when setting the price. As a result, an appropriate buyer appeared surprisingly quickly, and the process progressed smoothly. The family that just arrived became the new owners of the house. Our original plan was to eagerly await Tyler's return, but fate forced a change in plans. Tyler was also pleased with the sale of the house, and that was my only consolation. The way the movers moved the furniture in so quickly was like a precision machine in action. Meanwhile, my in-laws, forced to leave the property, watched a moving scene in astonishment. When their hired movers angrily demanded explanations amidst the confusion, my in-laws were at a loss for words. For the movers, it was an incomprehensible situation of overlapping moving tasks, declaring it a contractual violation and confronting my in-laws, who failed to provide a proper explanation. Eventually, the furniture was returned to the original place, but the unexpected situation incurred additional charges. Seemingly grasping the situation, my mother-in-law approached me, pleading in a trembling voice, "Considering the home was my eldest son's wife's inheritance, it should also belong to us. No. This situation is absurd." However, her futile attempts and excuses had no impact on me. I completely ignored their arguments and decided to leave with my belongings. The property now belonged to the new family, and I had no obligation or right to answer any further. After Tyler's funeral, where I encountered my in-laws, they seemed eager to discuss the house issue but ultimately left quietly without saying anything. I had no obligation to convey anything to my in-laws and had almost no words to exchange with them. Now, in my new residence, I am leading a peaceful life. In this small house, where we were originally supposed to start anew, I was faced with deep sorrow due to his absence. The savings from selling the house were substantial, but without my husband, the dream of building a new home had vanished. I returned to work, cherishing the precious memories with my husband, and am gradually regaining a positive outlook. As for my in-laws, particularly my mother-in-law, it seems that unresolved grievances were accumulating. However, I had no desire to engage with them any further and had not shared my new address. With no possibility of contacting me, my mother-in-law's frustrations only grew. Although she once boasted to her eldest son, she was now unable to visit my brother-in-law and remained unaware of my whereabouts. The pressure built up, and my mother-in-law finally lost her mind. In the dead of night, she scattered gasoline around the vicinity of the sold property. Fortunately, a local resident who happened to pass by became suspicious and immediately stopped her, preventing anything major from happening. When reported to the police, it was discovered that she had prepared newspapers and a lighter, and my mother-in-law was arrested for attempted arson. The homeowner, who almost became the victim of arson, was so angry that they threatened to sue me as well after learning who the intrusive woman was. I apologized repeatedly, but since it was an attempted arson, there was nothing I could do about the crime my mother-in-law committed. Ultimately, her obsession with the house led to her prosecution. Through multiple apologies, I managed to seek forgiveness and promised to ensure such an incident would never happen again. My mother-in-law was raised in a pampered environment, accustomed to getting whatever she wanted. Facing a situation where she couldn't have that house, frustration and jealousy emerged. She reluctantly began to resent the house and land, resorting to crime, which eventually led her to get imprisoned. My father-in-law, who was normally supportive, started to constantly quarrel with her after the arrest and ultimately chose to abandon her and get a divorce. As a result, my mother-in-law completely lost a home to return to after her sentence. However, this can also be seen as the consequence of her own choices. My brother-in-law felt lonely after losing his brother but comforted me, saying, "I can endure it, because I still have you." The relationship with my in-laws had ended, but that didn't mean I had lost all my family. Determined to aim for a peaceful everyday life, also for my late husband watching over me from heaven, I moved forward.